Welcome to Harry's. Today we bring you an unforgettable story. What if Harry discovered he could command Dementors at age 10 and unleash them on his enemies? Loving our content? Smash that like button and join our family by subscribing. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1, The darkness responds. The rock hit Harry square between the shoulder blades, sending him stumbling forward onto the cracked pavement. Pain bloomed across his back as Dudley's laughter echoed through the empty playground. "Too slow, freak," Dudley called, his gang of friends spreading out to block any escape route. "Thought you could outrun us?" Harry scrambled to his feet, glasses askew and heart hammering. This was bad. Usually he could avoid Dudley's gang by sticking to crowded areas or using shortcuts only someone as skinny as him could navigate. But he'd gotten careless, too absorbed in the rare pleasure of having the swings to himself after school. 5 against 1, Harry said, backing up until he felt the cold metal of the slide behind him. "Really brave, Big D." Piers Polkiss, Dudley's rat-faced best friend, snickered. "Your mouth's writing checks your scrawny body can't cash, Potter." The familiar helplessness washed over Harry. 10 years old and still unable to stop the constant torment. The Dursleys wouldn't care, they'd blame him somehow, like they always did. Teachers looked the other way because no one wanted to cross Dudley's parents. No matter what strange things sometimes happened around him when he was scared or angry, it never seemed enough to truly protect him. "I've been practicing my punches," Dudley announced, cracking his knuckles as he stepped forward. "Dad says I'm getting proper form now." Something cold and hard settled in Harry's stomach. He was tired, so tired, of being everyone's punching bag. The unfairness of it all crashed over him like a wave, and for the first time, Harry didn't feel fear as the gang closed in. He felt rage. "Leave me alone." Each word came out like ice, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. The air around the playground suddenly chilled. The summer afternoon had been warm just moments ago, but now Harry could see his breath forming in front of him. The gang hesitated, looking around in confusion. "What's happening?" Malcolm, one of Dudley's cronies, asked nervously. Harry felt it before he saw it, a presence, something ancient and hungry, responding to his call. The feeling was like nothing he'd ever experienced, as if his anger had reached out and something had answered. Behind Dudley, the air seemed to ripple and darken. "D. Dudley," Piers stuttered, pointing with a trembling finger. Dudley turned, his face immediately draining of color. Harry couldn't clearly see what was causing their fear, just a vague shadowy form hovering 6 feet tall, cloaked and drifting slightly above the ground. But he could feel it, somehow connected to him, waiting for his direction. The coldness intensified. The other boys began backing away, their expressions shifting from confusion to terror. "What is that?" Dudley whispered, his voice cracking. "What did you do?" Harry didn't know, but somehow he understood he was controlling this thing. It moved when he wanted it to move. And right now, he wanted his tormentors gone. "I don't know," Harry said truthfully, a strange exhilaration filling him. "But it doesn't like bullies." The shadowy figure drifted closer to Dudley, who let out a whimper. The other boys broke and ran, screaming as they fled the playground. Only Dudley remained frozen in place, his legs seemingly unable to move. "Make it stop," Dudley begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Harry." The satisfaction of seeing his cousin terrified was intoxicating after years of abuse, but something in Dudley's broken plea reached through Harry's anger. He didn't want to be like them. He didn't want to hurt people, even Dudley. "Go away," Harry found himself whispering, unsure if he was talking to Dudley or the shadow. The figure hesitated, then slowly drifted backward. The temperature gradually returned to normal, though the summer warmth now felt almost oppressively hot after the intense cold. Dudley didn't wait to see more. The moment he regained control of his legs, he ran faster than Harry had ever seen him move, not even looking back once. Alone in the playground, Harry stared at the spot where the shadow had been. It wasn't completely gone, he could still feel it, lingering just at the edge of perception, waiting. "What are you?" Harry whispered. No answer came, but he felt a faint pull, like the shadow wanted him to follow. Curious and still riding the high of his victory, Harry gathered his backpack and headed toward the small wooded area behind the playground. The figure solidified again as he stepped between the trees, becoming clearer now that they were away from public view. It was cloaked in tattered black robes that seemed to float without wind, its face hidden in the depths of a hood. Skeletal, scabbed hands protruded from the sleeves. Fear should have overwhelmed him, but Harry felt only fascination. This creature had come when he needed it most. It had protected him. "Can you understand me?" he asked. The figure drifted closer in what seemed like affirmation. Harry reached out tentatively, but stopped short of touching the creature. The cold emanating from it intensified the closer his hand came. "Did I summon you somehow?" The hood tilted slightly, giving the impression of a nod. Harry took a deep breath, questions tumbling through his mind. "Will you come if I call you again?" Another slight movement that seemed like agreement. Harry felt a surge of excitement mixed with trepidation. Whatever this creature was, it was his. A protector that no one could take away from him. "I need to call you something," Harry decided. "How about Shadow?" The creature didn't object, and Harry felt a faint sense of approval through the strange connection between them. "You should probably go now," Harry said, checking his watch and realizing how late it was getting. "But I'll call you again when it's safe." Shadow receded, fading until Harry could barely see it, but the boy knew it wasn't truly gone. He hurried back toward Privet Drive, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter felt powerful. The Dursley household was in chaos when Harry slipped through the back door. Aunt Petunia was on the phone, her face pinched with concern as she spoke rapidly into the receiver. Uncle Vernon paced the living room, his face an alarming shade of purple. "Absolutely hysterical, Margaret. Vernon's called the police, but they're saying without any evidence of an actual attacker." Petunia paused, noticing Harry. "I'll call you back," she said quickly, hanging up. "You." Vernon rounded on Harry immediately. "What did you do to Dudley?" Harry kept his expression neutral. "Nothing. I haven't seen him since school." "Liar." Vernon roared, spittle flying from his mustache. "He came home babbling about you and some creature in the playground. Your freakishness is written all over this." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with Shadow's presence. How much had Dudley told them? "I don't know what he's talking about," Harry said carefully. "Maybe he saw a stray dog or something." Vernon grabbed Harry's arm, squeezing painfully. "Listen here, boy. The police are coming to take statements about this attacker Dudley claims was in the park. You will tell them you saw nothing unusual, understand? The last thing we need is you spouting nonsense about monsters and magic." Harry nodded quickly, finding it oddly convenient that for once, the Dursleys wanted him to deny something strange had happened. "Where is Dudley now?" "Upstairs," Petunia sniffed, wringing her hands. "The doctor gave him something to calm him. Said it was likely just an anxiety attack, but my poor Diddykins has never had anxiety in his life. Something frightened him terribly, and I know you're responsible." Harry ducked his head, hiding the flicker of satisfaction he couldn't quite suppress. The police arrived 30 minutes later, a bored-looking constable who clearly thought he was dealing with an overactive child's imagination. He asked Harry a few perfunctory questions, which Harry answered with practiced innocence. No, he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. No, he hadn't stayed at the playground long. Yes, Dudley sometimes got frightened easily. After the constable left, promising half-heartedly to keep an eye on the area, Vernon grabbed Harry by the scruff of his oversized shirt. "Cupboard. Now." "No dinner," he growled. And you'll stay there all weekend, thinking about whatever it is you did. Harry didn't argue. He needed time alone anyway, time to process what had happened and to figure out what Shadow really was. As Vernon locked the cupboard door, Harry settled onto his thin mattress, not even bothered by the punishment that would have devastated him just yesterday. He had a secret now. A powerful one. Sleep came eventually, but it was unlike any sleep Harry had experienced before. The moment unconsciousness took him, he found himself floating in darkness, surrounded by a bone-deep cold that somehow didn't frighten him. I'm dreaming through Shadow's eyes, he realized with startling clarity. The world looked different through the creature's perception. Everything living glowed with a strange, pulsing light, plants dimly, animals more brightly. When Shadow drifted near a fox hunting in the small wood, Harry could feel the creature's hunger awakening. The fox sensed Shadow's approach and bolted, but not before Harry felt something, an emotion, a memory, drift from the animal toward Shadow. It tasted like fear and the thrill of the hunt all at once, somehow nourishing to the shadowy creature. Shadow moved on, drifting toward the edges of Little Whinging. Harry experienced everything as if he were the creature, feeling its ancient hunger, its endless patience, its strange attraction to him. When Shadow passed near other humans, a couple walking late at night, a teenager smoking behind a convenience store, Harry felt the pull of their emotions, bright and tempting. But Shadow didn't approach them. Somehow, Harry knew the creature was respecting his unspoken wishes, not attacking random people despite its hunger. The dream shifted, and suddenly Harry was seeing through Shadow's perception as it hovered outside the second floor of number 4, Privet Drive. Inside, Dudley tossed and turned in his sleep, his face contorted in fear. The faint glow of his emotions, primarily terror and confusion, leaked through the walls, visible to Shadow. No, Harry thought firmly, surprising himself with how easily he communicated with the creature. Not him. Not anyone in this house. Not yet. Shadow drifted away obediently, though Harry felt its reluctance. The creature was hungry, and the fear Dudley radiated was particularly appealing to it. As dawn approached, Harry's consciousness began separating from Shadow's. Before the connection broke completely, he felt a final message from the creature, not in words, but in impressions. Shadow would remain nearby, waiting for his call. Shadow would protect him. Shadow was his. Harry woke in his cupboard with a gasp, his body drenched in cold sweat despite the summer heat. Outside, he heard Aunt Petunia unlocking the door, her sharp voice calling him to start breakfast. The events of yesterday and the strange dream should have seemed impossible in the harsh light of morning, but Harry knew with absolute certainty that it had all been real. Shadow existed, and somehow, impossibly, the creature had bonded with him. Harry slipped his glasses on, a small smile playing on his lips. Things were about to change at number 4, Privet Drive. The Dursleys kept Harry locked in the cupboard for most of the weekend, releasing him only for bathroom breaks and to cook meals. Harry didn't mind, he used the time to experiment with his new ability, reaching out with his mind to sense Shadow's presence. By Sunday evening, he discovered he could call the creature with just a focused thought. Shadow wouldn't fully materialize in the cramped cupboard, but Harry could feel it responding, the temperature dropping noticeably when it drew near. On Monday morning, Vernon unlocked the cupboard door with a grunt. "School," he said gruffly. "And no funny business today, boy." Dudley's still not himself. Indeed, Dudley was pale and jumpy at breakfast, flinching at small noises and refusing to look in Harry's direction. When it was time to leave for school, he practically ran ahead, clearly wanting to keep his distance. For the first time in years, Harry walked to school without worrying about Dudley and his gang jumping him from behind. The newfound freedom was exhilarating. School passed uneventfully until lunch period, when Harry spotted Piers Polkiss approaching him in the cafeteria. Dudley was conspicuously absent, probably still claiming illness to avoid facing Harry. "Potter," Piers said, trying to sound tough despite the nervous quiver in his voice. "Dudley might be scared of whatever trick you pulled, but I'm not." Harry set down his sandwich calmly. "That right, Piers? Yeah, Piers said, glancing around to make sure teachers weren't watching. So you'd better watch your back, because, Harry closed his eyes briefly, reaching out with his mind. Shadow, he called silently. Just a little. Just enough to scare him. The temperature around their table plummeted. Piers' words died in his throat as his breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air. It's right behind you, Harry whispered, opening his eyes. It remembers you, Piers. Harry couldn't actually see Shadow. The creature seemed to understand it shouldn't fully materialize in a crowded cafeteria, but the cold spot definitely hovered just behind the rat-faced boy. Piers went rigid, his face draining of color. Make it go away, he hissed, voice barely audible. Please, Potter. Leave me alone, Harry said simply. Not just today. Forever. You, Dudley, all of you. Or next time, I'll let it get closer. Piers nodded frantically, then bolted from the cafeteria without looking back. Around them, several students were rubbing their arms against the sudden chill, looking around in confusion. That's enough, Harry thought, and immediately the cold receded. Thank you, Shadow. A faint impression of satisfaction brushed against his mind, and Harry smiled into his sandwich. This was going to work out just fine. Over the next few weeks, Harry refined his control over Shadow. He discovered he could summon the creature more precisely, directing it to specific locations rather than just calling it to his side. He practiced in the small wooded area behind the playground after school, safely hidden from curious eyes. Can you touch that tree branch? Harry asked one afternoon, pointing to a low-hanging limb. Shadow drifted toward it, extending a decayed-looking hand. When it made contact, frost immediately formed on the bark, spreading outward in delicate patterns. Harry watched in fascination as the leaves on that branch withered slightly. Wow, he breathed. You can freeze things. What else can you do? Through their strengthening bond, Harry sensed that Shadow's abilities were primarily focused on emotions, specifically, feeding on them and manipulating them. The cold was a side effect of its presence, not its main power. Harry's dreams continued to connect him to Shadow's perspective. Through these dreams, he learned more about the creature's nature. Shadow hungered for emotions, particularly strong ones like fear, despair, and grief. It could extract these feelings from humans, leaving them temporarily hollowed out. The process nourished Shadow but left its victims feeling empty and cold. Despite this disturbing knowledge, Harry couldn't bring himself to fear the creature. Shadow had never taken emotions from him, quite the opposite. When near the creature, Harry felt a strange sense of completeness he'd never experienced before. One night, approximately a month after first summoning Shadow, Harry woke suddenly in his cupboard. Someone was in the house, someone who wasn't a Dursley. He could feel Shadow's agitation through their bond, a warning flaring in his mind. Danger? Harry questioned silently. The impression he received back was complex, not exactly danger, but something abnormal. Something magical, like Shadow itself. Harry pressed his ear against the cupboard door, straining to hear. Faint voices drifted from the kitchen, unfamiliar, adult voices speaking in urgent whispers. No choice, Minerva. The monitoring charms detected a Dementor in the vicinity multiple times. If one has gone rogue and is hunting in Muggle areas, I still think we should inform Albus before investigating ourselves, Severus. The headmaster is at the ICW conference until Thursday. If Potter is in danger, Harry's breath caught. They were talking about him. And they knew about Shadow, or at least, they knew what Shadow was. A Dementor. The word sent a tingle of recognition through Harry's mind, feeling right in a way no other description had. Silently, Harry called to Shadow, asking it to come closer but remain hidden. He needed protection if these strangers meant him harm. The air in the cupboard chilled as Shadow responded, not fully materializing but present enough that Harry could feel its reassuring coldness. Through their connection, he directed it to wait, to watch, to be ready. The kitchen conversation continued, their voices moving toward the living room. I still don't understand why a Dementor would be in Little Whinging of all places, the female voice, Minerva, said. They're supposed to be bound to Azkaban. Clearly one has broken the Ministry's control, the male voice, Severus, replied. Though how Potter factors into this is unclear. Perhaps it was simply hunting in the area and the proximity triggered the alarms. Harry's mind raced. These people knew about Dementors, about magic. Were they like him? Could they do strange things too? The voices fell silent suddenly. Harry held his breath, sensing movement in the hallway just outside his cupboard. Severus, Minerva whispered, her voice now alarmingly close. Do you feel that? Cold, Severus responded, his tone sharp with sudden alertness. Minerva, get your wand ready. There's a Dementor here. Right now. Harry panicked. They were going to attack Shadow. Without thinking, he pounded on the cupboard door. Don't hurt it, he shouted. It's with me. A stunned silence followed his outburst, then the sound of the cupboard lock sliding open. The door swung wide, revealing two figures staring down at him in shock, a severe-looking woman with her gray hair in a tight bun, and a tall, hook-nosed man dressed entirely in black. Both held what appeared to be wooden sticks pointed directly at Harry. The black-haired man spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Potter. What did you just say? Harry straightened up, trying to look braver than he felt. I said don't hurt it. Shadow listens to me. It won't attack unless I tell it to. The two adults exchanged alarmed glances. The woman, Minerva, Harry presumed, lowered her stick slightly. Harry, she said carefully, are you saying you're controlling a Dementor? Harry nodded slowly. Is that what it's called? A Dementor? The man's already pale face whitened further. Impossible, he breathed. No wizard can control Dementors without extensive training, and even then. Potter, the man continued, his black eyes boring into Harry's, where is this Dementor now? Harry hesitated, then decided honesty was his best option. It's here. Not fully, but I can bring it if you want to see. No, both adults shouted simultaneously. That won't be necessary, Minerva added quickly. Harry, how long have you been in contact with this creature? About a month, Harry replied. It came when Dudley and his gang were beating me up. It scared them away. The adults exchanged another loaded glance, some silent communication passing between them. Mr. Potter, Severus said finally, his voice controlled but tense, you need to come with us immediately. The headmaster must be informed of this development. Harry backed up against his cot. I'm not going anywhere with strangers. Who are you people? How do you know about Dementors? How do you know about me? Minerva sighed, her expression softening slightly. My name is Professor McGonagall, and this is Professor Snape. We're teachers at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. You were already scheduled to receive your acceptance letter next month, but this situation has accelerated matters. Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry repeated, his mind spinning. You mean magic is real? And I'm a wizard? Yes, Potter, Snape said impatiently. Your parents were magical as well. Surely your relatives told you this? Harry shook his head numbly. They told me my parents died in a car crash. They hate anything abnormal. McGonagall's lips thinned in disapproval. I told Albus these were the worst sort of muggles, she muttered. Harry, there is much you need to know, but the most pressing issue is this Dementor. These creatures are extremely dangerous. They feed on happy emotions and can eventually consume a person's soul. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with Shadow's presence. But Shadow doesn't hurt me. It protects me. Which is precisely why this situation is so unusual, Snape interjected. Dementors do not protect. They do not form attachments. They are among the darkest creatures in our world. I don't care, Harry said stubbornly. Shadow came when I needed help. It listens to me. I'm not sending it away. The cold in the hallway intensified at Harry's distress, frost beginning to form on the nearby wall. McGonagall raised her wand again, looking alarmed. Potter, Snape said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, control your pet, or we will be forced to take measures. Harry closed his eyes, reaching out to Shadow. It's okay, he thought soothingly. They're just scared of you. Back up a little, but stay close. The frost stopped spreading, and the temperature rose slightly. Harry opened his eyes to find both adults watching him with a mixture of fear and fascination. See, he said. I can control it. It doesn't hurt anyone unless I want it to. McGonagall looked deeply troubled. Harry, the ability to communicate with such dark creatures is extremely rare. We need to take you to Hogwarts immediately, where Headmaster Dumbledore can properly assess this situation. I'm not leaving the Dursleys in the middle of the night, Harry protested. They'll think I've been kidnapped. We will leave them a note, McGonagall assured him. And we can bring you back once we've addressed this issue. Harry considered his options. These people clearly knew more about magic and Dementors than he did. If he went with them, he might learn more about his abilities, about his parents, about this magical world he apparently belonged to. Fine, he decided. I'll come with you. But Shadow comes too. Snape's expression soured further. Out of the question, Potter. Dementors are not permitted at Hogwarts. Then I'm not going, Harry said flatly. Shadow stays with me. McGonagall sighed heavily. Perhaps a compromise. The Dementor can accompany us to the edge of the school grounds, but cannot enter the castle itself. Hogwarts has ancient protections that may prevent it from entering anyway. Harry considered this, then nodded slowly. Okay. But I need to be able to check on it. Very well, McGonagall agreed, though she didn't look happy about it. Gather whatever belongings you wish to bring. We'll depart in 5 minutes. As the adult stepped back to allow him room to collect his meager possessions, Harry felt a surge of excitement beneath his anxiety. He was going to learn about magic. About his parents. About this whole hidden world he never knew existed. And he was bringing Shadow with him. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't face it alone. Hogwarts Castle was more magnificent than Harry could have imagined. Even arriving in the middle of the night, with most of its windows dark, the ancient structure took his breath away as they approached across the lake in a small boat. Professor McGonagall had explained they were using an unusual entry route to avoid detection, as bringing a Dementor, even one apparently under control, through the main gates might trigger alarms. Shadow drifted behind their boat, barely visible as a darker patch against the night sky. Wicked, Harry whispered as the castle grew larger, its towers seeming to touch the stars. Indeed, Mr. Potter, McGonagall replied, a hint of pride in her voice. Hogwarts has stood for over 1,000 years. In September, you will join the other first-year students for the traditional sorting ceremony. Snape, who had been silent throughout most of the journey, spoke abruptly. Assuming, of course, that your unusual companion doesn't complicate matters. Harry ignored the jibe, too entranced by the castle to care about Snape's attitude. Through his connection with Shadow, he could feel the Dementor's reaction to Hogwarts as well, a mixture of wariness and attraction. The castle radiated old magic that both repelled and fascinated the creature. They reached a small dock beneath the castle, where McGonagall led them through a hidden door and up a winding staircase. Harry glanced back, confirming that Shadow still followed at a distance. The headmaster's office is just ahead, McGonagall explained, stopping before a stone gargoyle. Lemon drop, she announced clearly. To Harry's amazement, the gargoyle leapt aside, revealing a spiral staircase that moved upward like an escalator. Cool, he breathed, following the professors onto the steps. At the top, they entered a circular room filled with strange silver instruments, portraits of sleeping old men and women, and more books than Harry had ever seen in one place. Behind a massive desk sat an ancient-looking man with a long silver beard, half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, and robes spangled with stars. Minerva, Severus, the old man greeted them, looking unsurprised by their middle-of-the-night arrival. And young Harry Potter. Welcome. Headmaster, McGonagall began without preamble, we have a situation of the utmost urgency. Mr. Potter has somehow formed a bond with a Dementor. It responds to his commands and has been following him for approximately a month. The twinkle in the old man's eyes dimmed noticeably. He rose from his chair, suddenly looking much more alert. Is this true, Harry? He asked gently. Harry nodded, lifting his chin slightly. Yes, sir. I call it Shadow. It protects me. And where is this Dementor now? Outside the castle, Harry replied. Professors McGonagall and Snape wouldn't let it come in. The old man, Dumbledore, Harry presumed, nodded gravely. A wise precaution. Harry, my boy, I must ask you a few questions about this extraordinary development. Please, take a seat. Harry sat in the offered chair, feeling suddenly very small under the intense gazes of three adult wizards. First, can you tell me exactly how you came to control this Dementor? Dumbledore asked. Harry recounted the incident in the playground, trying to explain the rage and helplessness he'd felt before Shadow appeared. As he spoke, Dumbledore's expression grew increasingly troubled. I see, the old wizard said when Harry finished. And you communicate with this creature, how, exactly? Not with words, Harry tried to explain. More like, feelings. Images. I think something, and it understands. And sometimes, when I'm asleep, I can see through its eyes. Snape made a strangled noise at this revelation. Headmaster, this goes beyond unprecedented. The boy is forming a mental bond with one of the darkest creatures known to wizardkind. Indeed, Severus, Dumbledore agreed gravely. Harry, I must impress upon you the seriousness of this situation. Dementors are not pets or protectors. They are ancient creatures of darkness that feed on human happiness and, given the opportunity, will consume a person's very soul. Shadow doesn't hurt me, Harry insisted stubbornly. It only scares people who try to hurt me first. For now, perhaps, Dumbledore conceded. But the influence of such a creature over time can be corrupting, Harry. Dark creatures change those who associate with them, often in ways they don't immediately notice. Harry frowned, feeling defensive. So what are you saying? That I should get rid of Shadow? I won't. It's the first thing that's ever been on my side. A flash of sadness crossed Dumbledore's face. No, Harry, not the first. Your parents fought valiantly to protect you. And there are many in our world who have looked out for your welfare, though perhaps not as directly as you deserved. Harry's anger deflated slightly at the mention of his parents. You knew them. I did, Dumbledore said gently. Lily and James Potter were exceptional people, brave, kind, and powerful wizards. They would want you safe, Harry. And a relationship with a Dementor, however benign it may seem now, is not safe. Before Harry could respond, a soft chiming sound filled the office. Dumbledore frowned, turning toward one of the silver instruments on a nearby table. It was spinning rapidly, emitting puffs of silver smoke. The boundary wards, he murmured, rising quickly. Something is attempting to enter the castle grounds. Harry felt a pull through his bond with Shadow. The Dementor was trying to reach him, sensing his distress. It's just Shadow, he explained quickly. It feels when I'm upset. It's trying to protect me. McGonagall looked alarmed. Albus, if a Dementor breaches the school's defenses, indeed, Minerva. Dumbledore turned to Harry, his expression grave but kind. Harry, I must ask you to call your companion back. Hogwarts' ancient protections are designed to repel dark creatures. If your Dementor forces its way through, it could be injured, or worse. Harry hesitated, then closed his eyes, reaching out along the bond. Shadow, stop. I'm okay. These people aren't hurting me. Just wait outside like we agreed. He felt Shadow's reluctance, its protective instinct warring with its desire to obey him. Finally, the pressure eased as the Dementor backed away from the barriers. The silver instrument slowed its spinning, the chiming fading to silence. Remarkable, Dumbledore murmured, studying Harry with intensified interest. You truly do command it. I told you, Harry said simply. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. This presents both an opportunity and a challenge, Harry. The ability to communicate with and control Dementors is vanishingly rare. In all my years, I have never encountered a documented case of a wizard, let alone a child, forming such a bond. So what happens now? Harry asked warily. Now, Dumbledore said, we must find a balance. I cannot in good conscience allow you to continue this relationship without understanding it better. Yet I also recognize that forcibly separating you from this creature could be problematic. You can't take Shadow away, Harry said fiercely. I won't let you. No, I suspect we could not, even if we tried, Dumbledore agreed, surprising Harry. Magic born of deep emotion, especially a child's magic, can create bonds that defy conventional understanding. But Harry, I must insist on certain precautions. He outlined a plan. Harry would return to the Dursleys for the remainder of the summer, but would receive weekly visits from a wizard named Remus Lupin, who would teach him about the magical world and monitor his interaction with Shadow. In exchange, Harry would agree not to use the Dementor against Muggles and would limit his communication with it. Additionally, Dumbledore concluded, you must promise never to summon more than one Dementor. The ability to control multiple dark creatures would raise concerns in our world. Harry bit his lip, not mentioning that he'd already experimented with calling a second Dementor. That particular secret felt too valuable to share. Fine, he agreed instead. But I need something in return. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. Yes, Harry. I want books. Books about Dementors, about magic, about my parents. I want to know everything. A smile crept across Dumbledore's face. Knowledge is a worthy pursuit, my boy. I believe we can accommodate that request. As dawn approached, Harry found himself back at Privet Drive, his head spinning with everything he'd learned. The Dursleys were still asleep, none the wiser about his midnight adventure. Shadow hovered just outside his window, a comforting presence in the pre-dawn gloom. We're going to learn so much, Harry thought to the Dementor. And no one's going to push us around anymore. Through their bond, he felt Shadow's agreement, and something else. A hunger, not just for emotions, but for the magic they had tasted at Hogwarts. A desire to grow stronger. Harry smiled as he drifted off to sleep. He had a feeling life was about to get very interesting. Remus Lupin arrived at Privet Drive the following Saturday, looking shabby but kind. After a tense introduction to the Dursleys, who had been informed by Dumbledore that Lupin was a special tutor for Harry's condition, Harry and his new teacher retreated to the small park where he had first met Shadow. So, Lupin began, settling onto a bench. Dumbledore tells me you've made an unusual friend. Harry nodded cautiously, studying the man. Lupin looked prematurely aged, with grey streaking his light brown hair despite appearing only in his early 30s. Scars crisscrossed his face, and his robes, while clean, were patched and faded. I can sense it nearby, Lupin continued, his nostrils flaring slightly. Dementors have a distinctive presence. You can call it Shadow, Harry said. That's its name. Lupin smiled faintly. Names are powerful things, Harry. By naming this creature, you've established a deeper connection than you might realize. Harry shrugged. It needed something to be called. Indeed. Lupin reached into his worn briefcase, withdrawing a book bound in dark leather. Headmaster Dumbledore asked me to begin your education with some context about Dementors. This text contains the most comprehensive information we have about them, though I must warn you, much remains unknown. Harry eagerly accepted the book, entitled Darkest Creatures of the Magical World. He flipped to the chapter on Dementors, quickly scanning the pages. They guard a wizard prison? He asked, looking up in surprise. Lupin nodded grimly. Azkaban. The Ministry of Magic employs Dementors as guards because the creatures naturally drain prisoners of hope and happiness, making escape nearly impossible both physically and mentally. Harry frowned. That sounds horrible. It is, Lupin agreed. Many in our world, myself included, consider the practice barbaric. But Dementors are difficult to control by conventional means, making alternatives challenging. Shadow doesn't seem to mind helping me, Harry pointed out. Which is precisely why your situation is so extraordinary, Harry. Lupin leaned forward, his expression intensifying. The book will tell you that Dementors breed in places of decay and despair, feeding on negative human emotions. What it won't tell you is why your particular Dementor has formed an attachment to you. Harry considered this. Maybe because I was really angry and scared when I first called it. It seemed to respond to those feelings. Perhaps, Lupin acknowledged. Or perhaps there's something unique about your magical signature. Your mother was particularly gifted with protective magic, after all. Harry's head snapped up. You knew my mother? A sad smile crossed Lupin's scarred face. I knew both your parents well, Harry. James was one of my closest friends at Hogwarts. Lily was brilliantly clever, much like you seem to be. For the next hour, Harry peppered Lupin with questions about his parents, temporarily forgetting about Dementors entirely. He learned that his father had been a prankster who excelled at transfiguration, that his mother had been exceptional at charms and potions, that they had both been in Gryffindor House at Hogwarts. Eventually, the conversation circled back to Shadow. Harry demonstrated his control, calling the Dementor closer but keeping it partially hidden among the trees. Lupin's face paled as the temperature dropped, but he maintained his composure. Remarkable, he murmured, drawing his wand but keeping it lowered. It truly responds to your will. I told you, Harry said, a hint of pride in his voice. Shadow doesn't hurt people unless they try to hurt me first. A commendable restraint, Lupin noted. But Harry, I must ask, have you ever directed it to feed? Harry shifted uncomfortably. Sort of. When Dudley and his gang were really awful, I let Shadow scare them. It took some of their happy feelings, I guess. They ran away crying. Lupin's expression grew grave. I understand the temptation for revenge, especially given how they've treated you. But allowing a Dementor to feed on muggles, even bullies, crosses a significant line, Harry. They deserved it, Harry muttered, but without real conviction. Perhaps they did, Lupin acknowledged surprisingly. But using a dark creature as a weapon is dangerous, not just for the victims, but for you. The more you allow Shadow to feed on negative interactions, the more it will hunger for them. And eventually, that hunger could exceed your ability to control it. Harry hadn't considered this perspective before. Through his bond with Shadow, he could feel the creature's constant hunger, a background need that never fully abated. Had it grown stronger in the weeks since they'd first connected? So what am I supposed to do? Harry asked. Just let Dudley beat me up again. Lupin smiled grimly. No, Harry. I'm going to teach you to defend yourself with magic. Legal magic that won't risk corrupting your soul. For the next few weeks, Harry's education progressed rapidly. Lupin proved an excellent teacher, patient and knowledgeable, with a dry sense of humor that made even the driest subjects interesting. He taught Harry basic defensive spells using a practice wand, since Harry wouldn't receive his real wand until his official trip to Diagon Alley, the fundamentals of potion making, and the history of the wizarding world. Throughout these lessons, Shadow remained a constant presence, never far from Harry, but keeping its distance as instructed. Harry continued communicating with the Dementor, but took Lupin's warnings to heart, limiting how often he allowed it to feed and never on Muggles. By the time Harry's 11th birthday approached, he had developed a tentative balance with his unusual companion. Shadow seemed content with their arrangement, occasionally hunting small animals in the woods when its hunger grew too intense, but mostly just watching over Harry from the shadows. The morning of July 31st dawned bright and clear. Harry woke early, excitement bubbling in his chest. Today was the day Hagrid would officially arrive to deliver his Hogwarts letter and take him shopping for school supplies. Lupin had explained that despite Harry's early introduction to the magical world, they needed to maintain certain appearances, including the formal delivery of his acceptance letter. As Harry dressed, he sensed Shadow's agitation through their bond. The Dementor seemed unusually restless, drifting closer to the house than it normally dared during daylight hours. What's wrong? Harry thought, reaching out along their connection. The impression he received was confusing, a mixture of hunger, anticipation, and something like territorial awareness. Shadow sensed something approaching, something magical. A thunderous knock on the front door confirmed the Dementor's premonition. Uncle Vernon's angry voice bellowed from downstairs, followed by the sound of the door crashing open. Harry grinned. Hagrid had arrived. Hurrying downstairs, Harry found a scene of chaos in the entryway. A massive man with a wild black beard filled the doorway, Vernon and Petunia cowering against the wall while Dudley attempted to hide his enormous bottom behind an umbrella stand. "There ya are, Harry," Hagrid boomed cheerfully. "Last time I saw ya, you was only a baby. Ya look a lot like your dad, but ye've got your mum's eyes." "Hello, Hagrid," Harry greeted him, trying to act surprised despite having been prepared for this moment by Lupin. The giant man blinked in confusion. "Ya know me already?" Harry thought quickly. You're kind of hard to forget, even from when I was a baby," he improvised. Hagrid seemed to accept this explanation, his beetle-black eyes crinkling in a smile. "Well, anyway, I've brought ya something. Might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." From inside his enormous overcoat, Hagrid produced a slightly squashed box. Inside was a sticky chocolate cake with, "Happy Birthday Harry," written in green icing. "Thank you," Harry said sincerely, touched by the gesture. "Now then," Hagrid continued, producing an envelope from another pocket. "Your Hogwarts letter. Official-like." Harry accepted the parchment envelope, pretending to be surprised by its contents even as he felt a genuine thrill at holding his official acceptance letter. As he read through the supply list, Harry felt the temperature in the entryway drop noticeably. Shadow was moving closer, drawn by the magical presence of Hagrid and perhaps curious about this new development. Hagrid shivered suddenly, looking around with a puzzled expression. "Blimey, it got cold all of a sudden. That normal for this place in summer?" The Dursleys, already terrified by Hagrid's appearance, now looked positively panicked. Dudley let out a whimper, his eyes darting to the corners of the room as if expecting to see Shadow materialize. Harry quickly reached out along his bond. "Stay back, Shadow. This man is a friend. No need to protect me." The temperature rose slightly, though he could still feel the Dementor hovering just outside the house, reluctant to retreat completely. "Just a draft," Harry said smoothly. "So, when can we go get my supplies?" "Right now, if yerry ready," Hagrid declared. "Got a lot to buy, and best be back before dark." Harry nodded eagerly, already heading for the door. The sooner they left, the farther he could get Shadow from the Dursleys before someone noticed its presence. "Now see here," Vernon finally found his voice. "We never agreed to pay for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks." Hagrid's friendly demeanor vanished instantly. He raised his pink umbrella menacingly, causing Vernon to cower back. "Never," he growled, "insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me." The temperature plummeted again, frost forming on the window panes. Harry felt Shadow's protective instinct flaring as it sensed Hagrid's anger directed toward him. "No!" Harry commanded silently, more forcefully than he'd ever communicated with the Dementor before. "Stay away." For a terrifying moment, he felt resistance, Shadow's desire to intervene battling against his command. Then, slowly, the cold receded as the Dementor backed away, though Harry could still feel its displeasure through their connection. "We should go," Harry said quickly, grabbing Hagrid's massive arm. "Right now. Please." Hagrid, distracted from his confrontation with Vernon, allowed Harry to pull him toward the door. "All right then, eager to get started, are ya?" "Can't say I blame ya." As they stepped outside into the summer sunshine, Harry cast a warning glance toward the shadows at the edge of the property, where he could just make out a darker patch hovering between Mrs. Figg's house and the neighbor's hedge. "Follow if you want," he thought toward Shadow, "but stay hidden. No muggles can see you. No wizards either. Understand?" The sense of reluctant agreement came through their bond. Shadow would obey, but it wasn't happy about it. "Everything all right, Harry?" Hagrid asked, noticing his distraction. Harry smiled up at the giant man. "Never better. I've been waiting for this day for a long time." And as they set off for London and Diagon Alley, Harry felt a surge of genuine excitement. Despite the complications of his unusual companion, he was finally going where he belonged, into the magical world. Diagon Alley exceeded even Harry's wildest expectations. The hidden wizarding shopping district bustled with life and color, shops selling everything from cauldrons to racing brooms lining the cobblestone street. Despite Lupin's descriptions, seeing it firsthand left Harry momentarily speechless. "Amazing, isn't it?" Hagrid chuckled, watching Harry's wide-eyed reaction. "First stop's Gringotts, Wizarding Bank. Gotta get ya some money for your supplies." As they approached the imposing white marble building, Harry felt a familiar chill. Shadow had followed them into London, keeping its distance but never losing track of him. Now, as they prepared to enter Gringotts, Harry sensed the Dementor's unease about the goblin guard standing at attention outside the bronze doors. "Stay back," Harry warned it silently. "These creatures might sense you." Through their connection, he felt Shadow retreat, drifting to the shadows between two nearby shops to wait. Inside Gringotts, Harry discovered his parents had left him a substantial fortune, piles of gold, silver, and bronze coins secured in a high-security vault. As Hagrid filled a small pouch with money for Harry's school supplies, the half-giant mentioned another errand. "Dumbledore asked me to pick something up while we're here," he explained mysteriously. "From Vault 713. Hogwarts business, very secret." Harry watched with interest as Hagrid collected a small, grubby package from the high-security vault. Whatever it contained was clearly valuable, but Hagrid refused to elaborate further. Back outside, they began collecting Harry's school supplies, robes from Madame Malkin's, books from Flourish and Blot's, potion ingredients from the apothecary. Throughout their shopping expedition, Harry remained acutely aware of Shadow's presence, drifting at the periphery of his awareness, occasionally drawing closer when the crowd pressed too tightly around him. At Ollivander's wand shop, Harry felt the Dementor's interest spike dramatically. The tiny, dust-filled shop radiated old magic, and as Mr. Ollivander began presenting wands for Harry to try, Shadow drew dangerously close to the store's entrance. "Stay back," Harry commanded fiercely as the temperature in the shop began to drop. "You'll ruin everything." Reluctantly, the Dementor retreated, though Harry could feel its fascination with the magical implements being tested. After trying nearly a dozen wands, Harry finally matched with an 11-inch holly wand with a phoenix feather core. Ollivander's revelation that the core's brother resided in Voldemort's wand sent a shiver down Harry's spine unrelated to Shadow's presence. "Curious indeed," Ollivander murmured, his silvery eyes fixed on Harry. "I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, yes, but great." As they left the shop, Harry sensed Shadow's agitation. The Dementor had reacted strongly to Voldemort's name, though Harry couldn't interpret the complex emotions coming through their bond. Their final stop was Aesop's Owl Emporium, where Hagrid insisted on buying Harry a birthday present, a beautiful snowy owl who watched him with intelligent amber eyes. "Thank you, Hagrid," Harry said sincerely, stroking the owl's feathers through the cage bars. "She's perfect." "Ah, it's nothin'," Hagrid said gruffly, clearly pleased by Harry's reaction. "Not right, ye not havin' presents on your birthday." As evening approached, Hagrid returned Harry to Privet Drive, promising to collect him on September 1st for the journey to Hogwarts. Harry hugged the giant man goodbye, genuinely grateful for the wonderful day. Once Hagrid departed, Harry carried his new possessions up to his bedroom, no longer the cupboard under the stairs, as the Dursleys had hastily relocated him after Lupin's first visit. Vernon and Petunia gave him a wide berth, clearly terrified by the day's events. Alone in his room, Harry released his new owl from her cage, allowing her to stretch her wings before settling on the headboard of his bed. "I think I'll call you Hedwig," he told her, remembering the name from one of his history books. "Do you like that?" The owl hooted softly in what seemed like approval. The temperature in the room dropped as Shadow materialized by the window, more fully visible than it had been all day. Harry sensed the Dementor's curiosity about Hedwig, and the owl's immediate distress at the dark creature's presence. "It's okay, Hedwig," Harry soothed, stroking her feathers. "Shadow won't hurt you. You're both my friends." Shadow drifted closer to the owl, who ruffled her feathers nervously but didn't fly away. Through their bond, Harry impressed upon the Dementor that Hedwig was to be protected, not threatened. Gradually, the owl's distress eased, though she maintained a wary eye on the floating creature. "See?" Harry said, smiling. "We can all get along." He spent the evening exploring his new school books, occasionally reading interesting passages aloud to Shadow. The Dementor seemed particularly interested in the Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook, hovering close as Harry flipped through chapters on dark creatures. When he reached the section on Dementors, Harry read it with intense focus, comparing the text to his own experiences. Much of it aligned with what Lupin had taught him, but some details surprised him. Dementors are among the foulest creatures that walk this earth. They infest the darkest, filthiest places, they glory in decay and despair, they drain peace, hope, and happiness out of the air around them. Get too near a Dementor and every good feeling, every happy memory will be sucked out of you. If it can, the Dementor will feed on you long enough to reduce you to something like itself, soulless and evil. Harry glanced up at Shadow, who hovered silently nearby. "Is that true? Would you take my soul if I let you?" Through their connection, Harry received not a direct answer but a complex impression: hunger, restraint, connection. Shadow hungered for souls, yes, but recognized Harry as something different, not prey, but companion. "I trust you," Harry told the Dementor. "But I need you to promise me something. When we get to Hogwarts, you can't hurt anyone unless I'm in real danger. No feeding on students or teachers, even if they're mean to me." Shadow's response was reluctant but affirmative. It would obey, though Harry sensed its hunger would grow stronger without regular feeding. "We'll figure something out," Harry promised. "Maybe there are animals in the forest you can feed on, or we can find another solution." As he prepared for bed that night, Harry felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation about the journey ahead. In just 1 month, he would board the Hogwarts Express, beginning his formal magical education. He would make friends, learn spells, and discover more about his parents and his place in the wizarding world. And Shadow would be with him every step of the way, his first real protector, his dark guardian. Whatever challenges arose, Harry knew he wouldn't face them alone. In his dreams that night, Harry saw through Shadow's eyes as the Dementor drifted over Little Whinging, observing the sleeping town from above. The creature's hunger was a constant presence, but so was its loyalty to Harry, a strange, unprecedented bond that defied explanation. As September 1st approached, Harry sensed that both he and Shadow stood on the threshold of something momentous. The wizarding world awaited them, unaware that the boy who lived was bringing a Dementor to Hogwarts. Chapter 2, shadows at Hogwarts platform 9 3/4 buzzed with activity as Harry pushed his trolley through the magical barrier. Families crowded the platform, students shouted greetings to friends, and the scarlet Hogwarts Express gleamed in the morning light, steam billowing from its engine. Blimey, Harry breathed, taking it all in. The last month had crawled by, each day marked off his calendar with growing anticipation. Uncle Vernon had reluctantly driven him to King's Cross, clearly relieved to be rid of his nephew for the school year. The Dursleys had maintained an uneasy distance ever since Hagrid's visit, speaking to Harry only when absolutely necessary. Shadow had remained a constant presence, though Harry had been careful to keep the Dementor well hidden during Remus Lupin's weekly visits. The wizard had taught Harry basic defensive spells, magical history, and even some simple potions, always ending their sessions with stories about his parents. Now, finally, Harry stood at the threshold of his new life. Through his connection with Shadow, he sensed the Dementor's presence, drifting high above the platform, hidden in the station's shadowy rafters. "Stay out of sight," Harry reminded it. "Follow the train, but don't let anyone see you." The crowd on the platform parted momentarily, revealing a family of redheads gathered around their trolleys. The mother, a plump, kind-faced woman, was giving instructions to 4 boys while a small girl clutched her hand. Packed with muggles, of course, Harry perked up, recognizing fellow wizards. Pushing his trolley closer, he caught the end of their conversation as the mother directed her children through the barrier to the platform. "Excuse me," Harry said, approaching the woman after her youngest son had disappeared through the barrier. "Could you tell me how to get onto the platform? First time at Hogwarts." "Ron's new too," she said kindly, gesturing toward where her youngest son had vanished. "Yes," Harry nodded. "I'm just not sure how." "Not to worry, dear. All you have to do is walk straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop and don't be scared you'll crash into it, that's very important. Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous." "Thanks," Harry said gratefully, lining up his trolley. He pushed forward, breaking into a jog as he approached the solid-looking barrier. Just when collision seemed inevitable, he passed through onto platform 9 3/4. The twins who had gone before him, Fred and George, he'd heard their mother call them, helped Harry load his trunk onto the train. When they spotted his scar, their eyes widened in recognition. "Blimey," one of them said. "Are you?" "He is," the other twin confirmed. "Aren't you?" "What?" Harry asked, confused. "Harry Potter," they said in unison. "Oh, him," Harry said awkwardly. "I mean, yes, I am." The twins gaped until their mother called them away. Harry quickly found an empty compartment, settling in and releasing Hedwig from her cage so she could stretch her wings. "We're finally going," he told her quietly. "To Hogwarts." The owl hooted softly, nipping his finger affectionately before settling on the luggage rack to sleep. Through the window, Harry watched families saying goodbye on the platform. A pang of longing hit him, he had no one to wave to, no parent to hug him farewell. Shadow sensed his sadness, drifting closer to the train. The temperature in the compartment dropped several degrees. "Not now," Harry thought firmly. "You'll draw attention." Reluctantly, Shadow backed away, and the chill receded. A knock on the compartment door interrupted Harry's thoughts. The red-haired boy from the platform stood in the doorway, looking nervous. "Anyone sitting here?" he asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." "Go ahead," Harry invited, glad for the company. "I'm Ron, by the way." "Ron Weasley," the boy said, settling in. "Harry Potter," Harry replied, watching Ron's eyes widen predictably. "Blimey, really? Do you have the, you know?" Ron gestured vaguely to his forehead. Harry lifted his bangs, revealing the lightning-shaped scar. "Wicked," Ron breathed. "So that's where you know who?" "Yeah," Harry confirmed, lowering his bangs. "But I don't remember it." "Nothing?" Ron asked eagerly. "Well, Just a lot of green light, Harry said. But nothing else. The train lurched forward, beginning its journey to Hogwarts. As London disappeared behind them, Ron peppered Harry with questions about living with Muggles, while Harry asked about growing up in a wizarding family. The conversation flowed easily, and Harry found himself relaxing in Ron's company. An hour into the journey, the compartment door slid open again, revealing a girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "Neville's lost one," she said in a bossy voice. "No," Ron replied, but the girl had already spotted Harry's wand, which he'd taken out to show Ron. "Oh, are you doing magic?" "Let's see, then." Ron, put on the spot, attempted a spell his brothers had taught him to turn his rat scabbers yellow. When it failed, the girl launched into a rapid-fire introduction. "I'm Hermione Granger, by the way." "And you are?" "Ron Weasley." "Harry Potter." "Are you really?" Hermione asked, eyes widening. "I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Am I?" Harry asked, stunned. "Of course. Didn't you know?" "I'd have found out everything I could if it was me," Hermione continued breathlessly. "Anyway, I'd better go look for Neville's toad. You two should change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon." She left as abruptly as she'd arrived, leaving Ron shaking his head. "Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it," he muttered. As the train continued northward, the sky outside darkened. Harry felt Shadow following at a distance, the Dementor keeping pace easily. Occasionally, students walking past their compartment shivered unexpectedly, rubbing their arms against a sudden chill they couldn't explain. When three boys entered their compartment later, Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle, Harry recognized the blonde boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. Malfoy's attempt to befriend Harry quickly soured when he insulted Ron's family. "I'd be careful if I were you, Potter," Malfoy sneered after Harry refused his friendship. "Unless you're politer, you'll go the same way as your parents." Anger flared in Harry, and with it, the temperature in the compartment plummeted. Frost formed on the windows as Shadow, responding to Harry's emotion, drew dangerously close to the train. Malfoy and his cronies looked around in confusion, suddenly able to see their breath. "What the?" Malfoy began, his voice faltering as an inexplicable dread washed over him. "No!" Harry commanded Shadow desperately. "Back away." The cold receded slowly, Shadow reluctantly retreating. Malfoy, looking genuinely unsettled, backed toward the door. "What kind of freak magic was that, Potter?" he demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I don't know what you're talking about," Harry replied coolly. "Maybe you should leave before the temperature drops again." The implied threat worked. Malfoy and his friends retreated quickly, casting nervous glances over their shoulders. "That was bloody brilliant!" Ron exclaimed once they were gone. "How did you do that?" "The cold thing." Harry forced a casual shrug. "Just something I picked up." "Accidental magic, probably." Ron looked impressed but not entirely convinced. Before he could press further, a voice echoed through the train announcing their imminent arrival at Hogsmeade Station. As they disembarked into the chilly night air, Hagrid's familiar voice boomed over the crowd, "Fur's years. Fur's years over here." The giant man beamed when he spotted Harry. "All right there, Harry." "Fine, thanks," Harry called back, grinning. Hagrid led the first-year students down a steep, narrow path to a fleet of small boats waiting on the shore of a vast black lake. As they rounded a bend, Hogwarts Castle came into view, perched atop a high mountain, its windows sparkling against the starry sky. "No more than 4 to a boat." Hagrid called, and Harry and Ron climbed into one, joined by Hermione and Neville. As their boat glided across the smooth, glass-like surface of the lake, Harry felt Shadow's presence intensify. The Dementor, drawn to the ancient magic radiating from the castle, hovered just above the water's surface, invisible to all but Harry. "Stay back," Harry warned it. "The castle might have defenses against creatures like you." Shadow's reluctance came through their bond, but the Dementor obeyed, maintaining a safe distance as the boats approached the cliff on which Hogwarts stood. After docking in an underground harbor and climbing a passageway up to the castle, the first years gathered before enormous oak doors. Hagrid knocked 3 times, and the doors swung open to reveal Professor McGonagall, looking as stern as Harry remembered from their midnight meeting weeks ago. She led them into a small chamber off the entrance hall, explaining the sorting ceremony and the 4 houses of Hogwarts. When her gaze landed on Harry, he detected a flicker of concern in her expression. "I shall return when we are ready for you," she said. "Please wait quietly." As soon as she left, nervous whispers broke out among the first years. Harry remained silent, feeling Shadow's presence outside the castle walls. The Dementor was agitated, sensing the castle's ancient protective magic pushing against it. "Just stay out of sight," Harry thought, trying to calm his dark companion. "I'll be fine in here." McGonagall returned shortly, leading them into the Great Hall, a magnificent space lit by thousands of floating candles, with 4 long tables filled with students and a high table where the teachers sat. The ceiling above mirrored the night sky outside, stars twinkling against velvety blackness. "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside," Hermione whispered. "I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years, topping it with a patched, frayed wizard's hat. To Harry's amazement, a rip near the brim opened like a mouth, and the hat began to sing about the 4 Hogwarts houses. When the song ended, McGonagall began calling students forward alphabetically. One by one, they approached the stool, placed the hat on their heads, and were sorted into their houses. "Potter, Harry," McGonagall called eventually, and whispers immediately broke out across the hall. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter?" Harry approached the stool, heart hammering in his chest. The last thing he saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. But what's this?" The hat's voice changed, growing wary. "A darkness follows you, Harry Potter. A shadow not your own, yet bound to you. How curious, how concerning. Please don't tell anyone," Harry thought desperately. "Your secret is safe with me," the hat assured him. "But heed my warning, such darkness can consume if not carefully managed. Now, where to put you?" "Not Slytherin," Harry thought. "Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, the hat mused. You could be great, you know, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. With your unusual companion, you'd find many paths open to you. No. Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor." The last word was shouted to the hall. Harry removed the hat, relief washing over him as the Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. Fred and George Weasley were shouting, "We got Potter! We got Potter," as Harry made his way to join them. From the high table, Dumbledore caught Harry's eye, giving him a small nod of acknowledgement. Beside the headmaster sat Professor Quirrell, wearing his purple turban, looking nervous as always. When their eyes met briefly, Harry felt a sharp pain in his scar. Simultaneously, he sensed Shadow's sudden interest. The Dementor had detected something about Quirrell that Harry couldn't perceive. "What is it?" Harry thought, but Shadow's response was confusing, a mixture of hunger and wariness. Once all the students were sorted, including Ron who joined Harry at the Gryffindor table, Dumbledore rose to his feet. "Welcome," he announced. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, Nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you." Food appeared magically on the golden plates, and conversation flowed freely as students began to eat. Harry, finally feeling like he belonged somewhere, joined in enthusiastically, though he kept part of his attention on Shadow's presence outside the castle. After dinner, Dumbledore gave a few start-of-term notices, including a warning about the forbidden third-floor corridor on the right-hand side. "And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song," the headmaster announced cheerfully, flicking his wand to produce a golden ribbon that twisted into words. As the school bellowed the song in various tunes, Harry felt Shadow growing restless. The Dementor had been separated from him for hours now, and its patience was wearing thin. Through their bond, Harry sensed its hunger intensifying. "Just a little longer," he promised it silently. "Once everyone's asleep, I'll find a way to check on you." Percy Weasley, a prefect and Ron's older brother, led the first-year Gryffindors up staircases, through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries, to the entrance of Gryffindor Tower, a portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress. "Password?" she asked. "Caput Draconis," Percy supplied, and the portrait swung forward, revealing a round hole in the wall leading to the Gryffindor common room. Percy directed the boys to their dormitory, a circular room with 5 four-poster beds hung with deep red, velvet curtains. Harry's trunk had already been brought up, along with Hedwig in her cage. The owl hooted softly in greeting as Harry approached. As his roommates, Ron, Neville, Seamus Finnegan, and Dean Thomas, prepared for bed, chatting excitedly about the days ahead, Harry went to the window. From here, he could see the edge of the Forbidden Forest, a mass of darkness against the night sky. Somewhere out there, Shadow waited. Harry could feel the Dementor's hunger growing, its patience wearing thin after hours of separation. "I'll come find you tomorrow," Harry promised it. "Just hold on until then." The response he received was reluctant acceptance, tinged with a coldness that had nothing to do with the Dementor's natural chill. Shadow wasn't used to being denied for so long. Harry fell asleep that night with mixed emotions, elation at finally being at Hogwarts, excitement about the magical education ahead of him, but also concern about maintaining his secret. How long could he keep Shadow hidden in a place filled with witches and wizards? Classes began the next morning, and Harry quickly discovered that there was much more to magic than waving a wand and saying a few words. They studied the night skies through telescopes in astronomy, learned about magical plants in herbology, and dozed through history of magic, taught by the only ghost professor, Binns. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, squeaked excitedly and toppled off his stack of books when he read Harry's name during roll call. Professor McGonagall, teaching Transfiguration, maintained her stern demeanor but watched Harry more closely than the other students. Each night, Harry slipped out of the dormitory after his roommates fell asleep, making his way to the castle grounds under cover of darkness. There, in the shadows near the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Shadow would be waiting. The Dementor had taken to hunting in the forest, feeding on the emotions of magical creatures that couldn't flee fast enough. "You can't keep doing this," Harry whispered one night, about a week into the term. "The centaurs have noticed something's killing small animals and leaving them empty." Through their bond, Shadow conveyed its growing hunger. The magical creatures of the forest provided some sustenance, but not enough to satisfy a Dementor accustomed to human emotions. "I know you're hungry," Harry acknowledged. "But we need to be careful. If anyone discovers you, they'll try to send you away." Shadow's response was dismissive, "Let them try." The Dementor's confidence in their bond and its own power was absolute. "Just hunt deeper in the forest," Harry suggested. "Stay away from the castle during the day." As he headed back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry nearly ran into Filch, the caretaker, patrolling the corridors. Only by ducking into an unused classroom did he avoid detection. Heart pounding, he leaned against the door, waiting for Filch's footsteps to recede. When he turned to leave, something caught his attention, a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame, standing on 2 clawed feet. An inscription was carved around the top, "Erist stra eru oit ube kafru oit anwosi." Curious, Harry stepped in front of it, and nearly cried out in shock. He wasn't alone in the reflection. Behind him stood a crowd of people, including a woman with dark red hair and green eyes just like his own, and a tall, thin man with untidy black hair and glasses. "Mom? Dad?" Harry whispered, reaching out to touch the glass. His parents smiled and waved, but when Harry glanced over his shoulder, the room remained empty. Heart racing, he looked back at the mirror. His parents were still there, beaming at him, and now he noticed something else in the reflection, a dark, hooded figure hovering protectively behind him. Shadow, visible and accepted, not hidden or feared. Harry sat cross-legged on the floor, staring hungrily at the scene in the mirror. His family, whole and smiling. Shadow, acknowledged as part of his life. Everything he wanted most in the world. He might have stayed all night if not for a noise in the corridor that startled him back to reality. Reluctantly, he tore his gaze away from the mirror and slipped out of the room, promising himself he'd return. For the next 3 nights, Harry returned to the mirror, sometimes bringing Shadow with him. The Dementor seemed fascinated by the mirror, drifting close to examine its reflection. On the 4th night, Harry found someone already there, Albus Dumbledore, standing in the shadows beside the classroom door. "Back again, Harry?" the headmaster asked gently. Harry tensed, wondering if Dumbledore had seen Shadow. The Dementor had fled moments before Harry entered the room, sensing the powerful wizard's presence. I didn't see you, sir," Harry stammered. "Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you," Dumbledore said, smiling. "So, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erist." "I didn't know it was called that, sir. But I expect you've realized by now what it does." When Harry shook his head, Dumbledore continued. "Let me give you a clue. The happiest man on earth would look into the mirror and see only himself, exactly as he is. It shows us what we want," Harry ventured. "Whatever we want." "Yes and no," Dumbledore said quietly. "It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. But remember, Harry, this mirror gives us neither knowledge nor truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen, or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible." Harry nodded, not mentioning the dark figure he'd seen behind his family in the reflection. "The mirror will be moved to a new home tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to go looking for it again," Dumbledore said firmly. "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." As Harry turned to leave, Dumbledore added, "And Harry? A word of caution about your companion. The castle's protections have registered an unusual presence near the forest edge these past nights. While I understand your attachment, I must remind you that such creatures cannot sustain themselves indefinitely on animal emotions." Harry froze, then slowly turned back. "You know. I am headmaster of this school, Harry," Dumbledore replied simply. "Very little happens on these grounds without my knowledge. So far, your Dementor has maintained a respectful distance from the students, for which I am grateful." "Shadow wouldn't hurt anyone unless I was in danger," Harry insisted. "Perhaps not intentionally," Dumbledore agreed. "But hunger can overcome even the strongest bonds of loyalty." The warning stayed with Harry as he returned to his dormitory. Was Shadow growing more difficult to control? The Dementor had been increasingly agitated lately, its hunger a constant pressure in the back of Harry's mind. Friday brought Harry's first potions lesson with Professor Snape. The class took place in the dungeons, a cold, damp room lined with jars of preserved animals floating in colored liquids. Snape, like Flitwick, began by taking roll call, pausing at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling names and looked up at the class, his eyes black and cold. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began in barely more than a whisper. "As there is little foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, and snaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach. Silence followed this speech. Hermione Granger sat on the edge of her seat, looking desperate to prove she wasn't a dunderhead. Potter. Snape said suddenly. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry, caught off guard, was grateful for Lupin's summer tutoring. The draught of living death, sir. A sleeping potion so powerful it mimics death. Surprise flashed across Snape's face, quickly masked by a sneer. Lucky guess. Let's try again. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? In the stomach of a goat, sir. It will save you from most poisons. Snape's eyes narrowed. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir, Harry answered confidently. Also called aconite. A tense silence filled the dungeon. Snape's expression was unreadable as he stared at Harry, his black eyes boring into green ones. Correct, he finally acknowledged, his voice cold. It seems someone has been preparing you, Potter. 1 point to Gryffindor for coming to class prepared. The grudging point awarded to Gryffindor stunned everyone. Snape was notorious for favoring his own house, Slytherin. As the lesson continued, Harry felt the professor's eyes on him constantly, watching his every move with suspicious intensity. When class ended, Harry remained behind, pretending to gather his things slowly. Once the other students had left, Snape approached his table. Your summer visitor taught you well, Potter, the professor said softly. Lupin always did excel at potions, though he lacked the necessary instinct for true mastery. You know Professor Lupin? Harry asked, surprised. We were acquainted at school, Snape replied dismissively. But that is not what concerns me today. There has been a disturbance in the castle's ambient magic these past weeks. A cold spot, one might say, that seems to follow you. Harry kept his expression neutral. I don't know what you mean, Professor. Don't you? Snape's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. The headmaster may tolerate your unusual pet, Potter, but rest assured, I am watching very closely. One slip, one incident where students are endangered, and I will personally ensure that creature is banished back to Azkaban where it belongs. Shadow wouldn't hurt anyone, Harry defended automatically, then realized his mistake as Snape's eyes glinted triumphantly. So you admit it is still here, the professor said. How touching that you've named it. Tell me, does your Dementor fetch sticks as well? Roll over on command. Anger flared in Harry, and with it, the temperature in the dungeon dropped noticeably. Frost formed on the nearest cauldron, spreading rapidly across the stone floor. Snape's hand moved to his wand, but he didn't draw it. Control yourself, Potter, he warned quietly. And control your creature, or there will be consequences. With effort, Harry reined in his emotions, and the frost stopped spreading. Shadow only responds to my feelings, he explained, trying to keep his voice steady. When I'm angry or scared, it tries to protect me. Then I suggest you work on mastering your emotions, Snape advised coldly. A skill your father never managed to acquire. With that parting shot, he dismissed Harry, who hurried from the dungeons, heart pounding. Through his bond with Shadow, he could feel the Dementor's agitation at Harry's distress. It wanted to come closer, to enter the castle and find whatever had upset its human companion. No, Harry commanded firmly. Stay in the forest. I'm fine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of classes, homework, and secret nighttime visits to Shadow. Harry maintained a careful balance, keeping the Dementor well fed on forest creatures while ensuring it stayed far from the castle during daylight hours. His friendship with Ron deepened, and gradually, he found himself spending more time with Hermione as well. Though initially irritated by her know-it-all attitude, her intelligence and loyalty slowly won him over. One evening in the library, while researching for a history of magic essay, Hermione suddenly gasped, drawing Harry's and Ron's attention. "What?" Ron asked, looking up from his parchment. "Listen to this," Hermione whispered, pushing an ancient-looking book toward them. "I was looking for information on Nicholas Flamel for that thing Hagrid accidentally mentioned, but I found something else instead." Her finger pointed to a paragraph in spidery text. "Among the rarest magical affinities is the bond between wizard and Dementor, documented only 3 times in recorded history. The last known case, Artemis Black, 1764 to 1803, was said to command a squadron of these fell creatures during the Goblin rebellions of the late 18th century. Such wizards, sometimes called Dementors' heirs, possess an innate connection to the creatures that transcends normal magical control methods. Ministry research into this phenomenon was abandoned as too dangerous in 1804 following Black's death by soul consumption." Harry's blood ran cold. Hermione was watching him intently, her clever eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Interesting, isn't it?" she said carefully. "Especially considering that cold spot that seems to follow you sometimes." "What are you talking about?" Harry deflected, trying to sound confused. "Don't play dumb, Harry," Hermione whispered. "I've noticed the temperature drops whenever you get upset. And sometimes at night, you disappear from the common room." Ron's noticed too. Ron nodded reluctantly. "Thought I was imagining things at first, mate. But that day with Malfoy on the train? That wasn't normal magic." Harry looked between his two friends, panic rising in his chest. This was it, the moment his secret was exposed, when the only real friends he'd ever made would turn against him. If I tell you something," he said slowly, "you have to promise not to tell anyone else. Not a single person." Ron and Hermione exchanged glances, then nodded solemnly. "We promise," Hermione said. "Whatever it is, Harry, you can trust us." Taking a deep breath, Harry explained in hushed tones about Shadow, how he'd first summoned the Dementor, their growing bond, and how he'd been sneaking out to check on the creature. He carefully omitted certain details, like his ability to see through Shadow's eyes or the fact that he'd experimented with summoning multiple Dementors. When he finished, Ron looked pale, while Hermione appeared fascinated despite her obvious fear. "Blimey, Harry," Ron whispered. "A Dementor? My dad told me about them once. They guard Azkaban prison. He said they're the worst things in the world." "Shadow isn't like that," Harry insisted. "Not with me." "But Harry, the book says the last wizard with this ability died when his Dementor turned on him," Hermione pointed out worriedly. "That won't happen to me," Harry said with more confidence than he felt. "Shadow and I understand each other." Hermione looked unconvinced but didn't argue further. "Does Dumbledore know?" "Yes," Harry admitted. "He's letting me keep Shadow as long as it stays away from students. That's why it has to hunt in the forest." "Hunt?" Ron squeaked. "What does it hunt?" "Just animals," Harry assured him quickly. "Small ones." An uncomfortable silence fell over the trio. Harry braced himself for rejection, for his friends to declare him dark and dangerous, to distance themselves from him. Instead, Hermione closed the book decisively. "Well, I want to know more. There must be other books about this. If we research together, maybe we can find ways to make your connection safer." You're not scared of me?" Harry asked incredulously. "Course we're scared, mate," Ron said bluntly. "Having a pet Dementor isn't exactly normal. But you're still Harry, aren't you? Just Harry with a really creepy bodyguard." Relief washed over Harry, so powerful he felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thanks," he managed, voice thick with emotion. "Both of you. Friends stick together," Ron shrugged. "Even when one of them has a soul-sucking monster for a pet." "Ronald." Hermione hissed, but Harry laughed, the tension broken. "Can we see it sometime?" Ron asked, curiosity overcoming fear. From a distance, like. Maybe, Harry hedged. But not now. It's too risky. As they packed up their books and headed back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry felt lighter than he had in weeks. Sharing his secret, having his friends accept him despite it, made the burden easier to bear. What he didn't tell them was how Shadow's hunger had been growing, how the forest creatures no longer satisfied it, how sometimes in the night he could feel the Dementors' desire to enter the castle, to feast on the emotions of hundreds of young wizards and witches. That particular worry, he kept to himself. Halloween arrived with the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. In Charms class that morning, Professor Flitwick announced they were ready to start making objects fly, a spell everyone had been eager to try since watching him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Flitwick paired the students up, putting Harry with Seamus Finnegan. Ron, unfortunately, was paired with Hermione, which led to inevitable friction as she corrected his pronunciation of Wingardium Leviosa multiple times. By the end of class, Hermione had successfully levitated her feather, while Ron was in a foul mood. "It's no wonder no one can stand her," he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. "She's a nightmare, honestly." Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past. It was Hermione, and Harry was startled to see tears in her eyes. "I think she heard you," Harry said quietly. "So?" Ron replied, though he looked uncomfortable. "She must have noticed she's got no friends." Hermione didn't appear for their next class or throughout the afternoon. On their way to the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. Ron looked increasingly awkward at this news, but the moment they entered the Great Hall, the Halloween decorations pushed Hermione from their minds. 1,000 live bats fluttered from the walls and ceiling, while 1,000 more swooped over the tables, making the candles in the pumpkin stutter. The feast appeared on golden plates, and Harry was just helping himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. "Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know," he gasped before sinking to the floor in a dead faint. The hall erupted into chaos until Dumbledore shot purple firecrackers from his wand for silence. "Prefects," he rumbled, "lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately." Percy Weasley sprang into action, ordering the Gryffindors to follow him in an orderly fashion. As they jostled their way through the crowd, Harry grabbed Ron's arm. "Hermione," he said urgently. "She doesn't know about the troll." Ron bit his lip, then nodded. "Fine, but Percy better not see us." They slipped down a deserted side corridor, hurrying toward the girls' bathroom. Just as they rounded a corner, they heard quick footsteps behind them. Ron pulled Harry behind a large stone griffin. To their surprise, they saw Snape crossing the corridor, heading not toward the dungeons but up the third-floor corridor, the one Dumbledore had forbidden. "What's he doing?" Harry whispered. "Why isn't he in the dungeons with the other teachers?" "Search me," Ron responded. As Snape disappeared from view, they crept along the next corridor, following the sound of his fading footsteps. "He's heading for the third floor," Harry noted, but Ron held up his hand suddenly. "Can you smell something?" A foul odor reached Harry's nostrils, a mixture of old socks and public toilet. Then they heard it, a low grunting and the shuffling of enormous feet. At the end of the passage, a massive figure moved into view, 12 feet tall, its skin dull granite gray, its lumpy body like a boulder topped with a small, coconut-sized head. The smell emanating from it was incredible. "The troll," Ron whispered, his voice hoarse with fear. "I thought Quirrell said it was in the dungeons." "It must have moved," Harry replied tensely. "Quick, let's get out of," a high, petrified scream echoed from a doorway just ahead, the girls' bathroom. "Hermione," they said together, fear forgotten as they sprinted toward the sound. Inside, they found Hermione shrinking against the opposite wall, looking as if she were about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking sinks off the walls as it went. "Confuse it!" Harry shouted desperately, seizing a tap and throwing it as hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped, turning its tiny eyes toward the noise. It hesitated, then made for Harry instead, lifting its club as it went. "Oi, pea-brain!" Ron yelled from the other side of the chamber, throwing a metal pipe at it. The troll didn't seem to notice the pipe hitting its shoulder, but it heard the yell and paused again, turning toward Ron. Harry used the distraction to circle around to Hermione. "Come on, run, run," he yelled, tugging at her sleeve, but she couldn't move, still pressed flat against the wall in terror. The troll was closing in on Ron, leaving him no escape. In desperation, Harry did something both very brave and very foolish. He took a running jump and managed to fasten his arms around the troll's neck from behind. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging there, but it certainly noticed when Harry's wand, still in his hand as he jumped, went straight up one of its nostrils. Howling in pain, it twisted and flailed, its club swinging wildly, with Harry clinging for dear life. Any moment, the troll would either tear him from its back or smash him with its club. Raw fear shot through Harry, and with it came an involuntary call for help, one that shot through his bond with Shadow with the force of a lightning bolt. The temperature in the bathroom plummeted instantly. Frost crackled across the mirrors and spread along the wet floor. The troll faltered, sensing something far more dangerous than 3 first-year students approaching. A dark, hooded figure materialized through the bathroom wall, its tattered black robes floating without wind, skeletal hands emerging from ragged sleeves. Shadow had come, breaking through the castle's ancient protections, drawn by Harry's fear. Ron let out a strangled cry, falling backward against the wall. Hermione, already terrified beyond reason, didn't seem to register this new horror. The troll swung around, Harry still on its back, to face the Dementor. Even the dull-witted creature recognized the danger, letting out a confused bellow that turned into a whimper. "Shadow, stop it!" Harry commanded, sliding off the troll's back. "But don't kill it." The Dementor glided forward, extending its decayed hands toward the troll. The massive creature staggered backward, dropping its club with a thunderous crash. It swiped at Shadow ineffectively, its movements growing sluggish as the Dementor's aura affected it. Harry realized he needed to end this quickly, before Shadow went too far. "Ron! The club! Use the spell!" Ron, shaking visibly but still functional, pointed his wand at the fallen club. Wingardium Leviosa. The club floated suddenly into the air, rose high above the troll, then dropped with a sickening crack onto its owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot, then fell flat on its face with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry rushed to Shadow, placing himself between the Dementor and the fallen troll. "That's enough," he said firmly. "It's unconscious. We're safe now." Shadow hesitated, clearly hungry after breaking through the castle's defenses. Harry could feel its desire to feed not just on the troll, but on Ron and Hermione as well, easy prey, filled with fear and shock. "No," Harry said forcefully, his voice echoing in the destroyed bathroom. "These are my friends. You will not harm them. Leave. Now." For a heart-stopping moment, Harry felt resistance through their bond, Shadow's hunger warring against Harry's command. Then, slowly, the Dementor backed away, fading through the wall from which it had appeared. As the temperature gradually returned to normal, Harry became aware of Ron staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered hoarsely. That was a Dementor." "That was Shadow," Harry confirmed, chest heaving from exertion and emotion. "I didn't mean to call it. It felt my fear and came on its own." A sudden slam and loud footsteps made all 3 of them look up. They hadn't realized the commotion they'd been making, but someone downstairs must have heard the crashes and the troll's roars. Professor McGonagall burst into the room, followed closely by Snape and Quirrell. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat quickly on a toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll, examining it with narrowed eyes. McGonagall was looking at Harry, Ron, and Hermione with the coldest fury Harry had ever seen. What on earth were you thinking? She demanded, cold fury in her voice. You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory? Please, Professor McGonagall, they were looking for me. Hermione had finally found her voice, though it shook slightly. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, you know, because I've read all about them. Ron dropped his wand in shock. Hermione Granger, telling a downright lie to a teacher. If they hadn't found me, I'd be dead now, she continued. Harry stuck his wand up its nose, and Ron knocked it out with its own club. They didn't have time to come and fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived. And the extreme cold. Snape interjected, his black eyes fixed on Harry. The frost covering these mirrors? Perhaps an unexpected winter draft, Miss Granger. Hermione faltered, clearly unaware of how to explain that particular phenomenon. That was me, sir, Harry stepped in. Accidental magic. When the troll was about to hit Ron, I panicked. Accidental magic of this nature is unusual, even in life-threatening situations, Snape pressed, his voice dangerously soft. McGonagall cleared her throat. Well, that's enough questions for now. Miss Granger, foolish girl, how could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? Hermione hung her head, and Harry was amazed to see the stern professor deduct only 5 points from Gryffindor before awarding 5 each to him and Ron for their daring rescue. As they left the bathroom, Harry could feel Snape's eyes burning into his back. The professor knew, or at least strongly suspected, what had really happened. Back in the common room, they found the Halloween feast had been relocated, the other Gryffindors enjoying the food and swapping stories about the troll. Harry, Ron, and Hermione found a quiet corner where they could talk privately. That was a real Dementor, Ron whispered, still looking shaken. Right in Hogwarts. And it listened to you. Harry nodded grimly. I'm sorry you had to see that. I didn't mean to call shadow, it felt my fear and broke through the castle's protections. It was terrifying, Hermione admitted, her voice barely audible. But it saved us, didn't it? The troll might have killed us otherwise. Yeah, Ron agreed reluctantly. Scary as hell, but useful in a pinch. Hermione fixed Harry with a serious look. But Harry, if it could break through Hogwarts protections, what's stopping it from coming inside whenever it wants? Me, Harry said simply. Shadow obeys me, mostly. I've ordered it to stay in the forest unless I'm in real danger. Mostly. Ron repeated, catching the qualification. What happens when it decides not to listen? Harry had no answer for that. The moment of resistance he'd felt from Shadow tonight, the first real challenge to his control, troubled him deeply. I need to talk to Dumbledore, he decided finally. Tomorrow. Before things get worse. The following morning, Harry received a note at breakfast delivered by a school owl. Mr. Potter, please join me in my office immediately after breakfast. The password is, acid pops. Professor Dumbledore, looks like Dumbledore had the same idea, Harry muttered, showing the note to Ron and Hermione. Do you want us to come with you? Hermione offered. Harry shook his head. Thanks, but I should handle this alone. If I'm not back by lunch, send a search party. The weak joke earned small smiles from his friends as Harry left the Great Hall, making his way to the gargoyle that guarded the headmaster's office. Acid pops, he said, and the gargoyle leapt aside, revealing the spiral staircase. Dumbledore was waiting behind his desk, his expression grave but not angry. Good morning, Harry. Please, sit down. Harry took the offered seat, noticing that they weren't alone. Professor McGonagall stood by the window, and to his surprise, Remus Lupin occupied another chair. Professor Lupin, Harry greeted him, relieved to see a friendly face. Hello, Harry, Lupin smiled tiredly. The headmaster asked me to join this conversation, given my role in monitoring your unique situation over the summer. Indeed, Dumbledore nodded. I believe we need to address what happened last night, Harry. Your Dementor entered the castle despite extremely powerful ancient protections designed specifically to repel such creatures. I didn't call Shadow on purpose, Harry explained quickly. The troll was about to kill us, and I was terrified. Shadow felt my fear through our bond and came to protect me. That is precisely what concerns us, McGonagall interjected. While your Dementor's intentions may have been protective, its presence in a school full of children is deeply troubling. Shadow didn't hurt Ron or Hermione, Harry pointed out. It only attacked the troll, and even then, it stopped when I commanded it to. This time, Dumbledore said quietly. But I must ask, Harry, did you feel any resistance when you ordered it to leave? Harry hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Just for a moment. Shadow was hungry after breaking through the castle's defenses. But it listened to me in the end. Lupin leaned forward. Harry, a momentary resistance now could become outright defiance later. Dementors are not pets or familiars, they are ancient dark creatures with their own nature and hungers. Shadow wouldn't betray me, Harry insisted, though without his usual conviction. Perhaps not intentionally, Dumbledore conceded. But as its hunger grows, its ability to resist its nature diminishes. The forest creatures clearly no longer provide sufficient nourishment. So what are you saying? Harry asked, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. That I should send Shadow away? Not necessarily, Dumbledore replied, surprising Harry. Your bond with this creature is unprecedented in recent history. Forcing separation might cause more harm than good, particularly given how the Dementor responded to your distress last night. Then what? I propose a controlled environment for your Dementor, Dumbledore explained. A secure location on the school grounds where it can remain close to you without endangering students. Professor Hagrid has a cleared area at the edge of the forest, well away from centaur territories and student paths, that could be warded appropriately. And feeding? Lupin asked the question Harry was thinking. Forest creatures clearly aren't sustaining it. I have been giving this considerable thought, Dumbledore said gravely. While ethically complex, we might devise a system whereby certain condemned magical creatures, those already sentenced to death for violent crimes against wizardkind, could serve as sustenance. Harry grimaced at the macabre suggestion, but couldn't deny it might solve the hunger problem. Would that be enough? Combined with larger forest creatures, perhaps, Dumbledore nodded. But Harry, this arrangement comes with conditions. You must agree to regular sessions with Professor Lupin, who has kindly consented to remain at Hogwarts as a special consultant. These sessions will focus on strengthening your control over your Dementor and understanding the nature of your bond. Additionally, McGonagall added, you must promise never to deliberately summon the creature inside castle walls except in life-threatening emergencies. And you must be honest with us, Harry, Dumbledore concluded. If you feel your control slipping, or if Shadow exhibits any unusual behavior, you must report it immediately. Harry considered these terms. They were reasonable, and certainly better than being forced to banish Shadow entirely. I agree, he said finally. But I want to be able to visit Shadow regularly. Of course, Dumbledore nodded. Supervised visits, initially, but that restriction may loosen as you demonstrate control. With the agreement settled, Lupin walked Harry back toward Gryffindor Tower. How are you really doing, Harry? The scarred wizard asked gently. This can't be easy, balancing school, friendships, and a bond with a Dementor. It's complicated, Harry admitted. Shadow's getting stronger, I think. More aware. Sometimes I feel like it knows things I don't, sees things differently. Lupin nodded thoughtfully. The connection goes both ways, Harry. Just as you influence Shadow, it influences you. That's what concerns Dumbledore most, not that your Dementor might attack students, but that its nature might gradually affect yours. You mean make me dark? Harry asked bluntly. Not necessarily dark, Lupin clarified. But perhaps more willing to use fear as a tool, more comfortable with others suffering, less affected by the pain of those you don't care about personally. The description hit uncomfortably close to how Harry had felt watching Dudley cower before Shadow. Hadn't he enjoyed his cousin's terror, just a little? "I don't want to become like that," Harry said quietly. "Then be vigilant," Lupin advised. "Monitor your own reactions as carefully as you monitor Shadow's. And rely on your friends. Having people who accept you despite knowing your secret is a powerful anchor to your humanity." As they reached the portrait hole, Lupin placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Your parents would be proud of how you're handling this, Harry. James always believed in taking responsibility for the consequences of one's actions, and Lily had an extraordinary capacity for love that transcended fear. You've inherited both those qualities." The words warmed Harry more than he could express. "Thanks, Professor. Call me Remus when we're in private," Lupin smiled. "After all, I'm not technically a professor here." Harry nodded, returning the smile before giving the password to the fat lady and climbing through the portrait hole. Ron and Hermione were waiting anxiously in the common room, and Harry quickly recounted his meeting with Dumbledore. "Condemned magical creatures?" Hermione repeated, looking troubled. "That sounds rather grim." "Better than the alternative," Ron pointed out. "If Harry's Dementor gets hungry enough to ignore him, we'd all be in danger." "At least Dumbledore's letting you keep Shadow," Hermione acknowledged. "I half expected him to banish it back to Azkaban." "I think he's curious," Harry said thoughtfully. "No one really understands this bond one have with Shadow. Dumbledore wants to study it as much as he wants to keep everyone safe." "Speaking of curiosity," Hermione lowered her voice, "I've been researching Dementors more deeply, and there's something interesting about them. They're not just dark creatures, they're actually manifestations of despair and fear. Some scholars believe they weren't created naturally but were born from ancient dark magic gone wrong." "What's that got to do with Harry?" Ron asked. "Maybe nothing," Hermione shrugged. "But if Dementors are magical constructs rather than natural creatures, it might explain why Harry can control Shadow. Maybe something in his magic resonates with the original spell that created them." Harry considered this theory. It made a certain sense, though it didn't explain why he specifically had this ability when other wizards didn't. "There's one other thing," Hermione added hesitantly. "The book mentioned that Dementors can sense magical power. They're drawn to it, especially powerful dark magic. If that's true, Shadow might be able to sense things about people that we can't." "Like what?" Harry asked. "I don't know exactly," Hermione admitted. "But it might explain why Shadow seemed so interested in Professor Quirrell last night. Did you notice how it kept drifting toward him, even after the troll was unconscious?" Harry hadn't noticed, but now that Hermione mentioned it, he recalled feeling Shadow's attention shift from the troll to the trembling defense teacher. Through their bond, he'd sensed the Dementors' hunger, interest. Something about Quirrell had drawn Shadow's attention. "I'll ask Shadow about it when I visit the containment area," Harry decided. Dumbledore said the setup should be ready by tomorrow. The weeks following Halloween brought a new routine for Harry. 3 times a week, he visited Shadow in its specially warded clearing at the forest's edge, always accompanied by either Lupin or Hagrid. The half-giant, despite his initial wariness, had developed a fascinated respect for the Dementor, treating it as he might any dangerous but misunderstood creature. "Amazin' creature," Hagrid commented during one visit, watching Shadow drift around its enclosure from a safe distance. "Terrible, oh, course, but amazin'. Never thought I'd see one up close without feelin' like I'd never be cheerful again." Harry had explained that Shadow's aura affected people less intensely when the Dementor was well-fed and calm. Dumbledore had arranged for a condemned manticore, responsible for killing 3 wizards in Scotland, to be transported to Hogwarts as Shadow's first substantial meal. The feeding had been disturbing to witness, but afterward, Shadow's hunger had subsided significantly, making it more controllable and less desperate to enter the castle. With Ron and Hermione's help, Harry continued researching his unusual bond. Hermione discovered historical accounts of other Dementors' heirs throughout wizarding history, though information was sparse and often contradictory. The most consistent detail was that such individuals could perceive emotions and intentions through their Dementors in ways ordinary wizards could not. "It's like having a magical lie detector," Hermione explained one evening in the library. "Dementors sense people's emotions, particularly fear and guilt. If you can interpret what Shadow perceives, you might be able to tell when someone's hiding something." This theory gained credence when Snape began limping shortly after Halloween. During a visit with Shadow, Harry experimentally asked the Dementor what it sensed about the potion's master. The impression he received was complex: pain, determination, suspicion, and a dark wariness directed at the third-floor corridor. Later, while retrieving a book Snape had confiscated, Harry glimpsed the professor's badly mangled leg as he attempted to bandage it, muttering about "that three-headed monster," and "how are you supposed to keep your eyes on all three heads at once?" "That settles it," Harry told Ron and Hermione afterward. "Snape tried to get past that three-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. He's after whatever it's guarding." The trio speculated that the object must be the small package Hagrid had retrieved from Gringotts, which coincided with the attempted bank robbery reported in the Daily Prophet. When questioned, Hagrid inadvertently let slip that the object belonged to Nicholas Flamel and was strictly between Dumbledore and Flamel. As the first Quidditch match of the season approached, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin, Harry found himself increasingly grateful for Shadow's heightened perceptions. During one flying practice, his broom had suddenly bucked violently, nearly throwing him off. Through his bond with Shadow, watching from the forest's edge, Harry sensed someone directing hostile magic at his broom. The Dementor couldn't identify who, but its instinctive reaction had been to drift closer to the Quidditch pitch, causing several students to shiver unexpectedly and distracting whoever was jinxing the broom. The day of the match arrived, and Harry felt a mixture of excitement and nerves as he donned his Quidditch robes. Shadow was confined to its enclosure, too far from the pitch to provide any insights, but Lupin had promised to attend the match and watch for any unusual magical activity. The game began with Lee Jordan's enthusiastic commentary and the teams shooting into the air. Harry, playing Seeker, rose higher than the rest, searching for the golden snitch while keeping an eye on the Slytherin Seeker, Terence Higgs. The match progressed rapidly, Gryffindor taking an early lead. Harry spotted the snitch several times but lost it in the chaos of the game. Then, without warning, his broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both his hands and knees, but it happened again, as though the broom was trying to buck him off. No one seemed to have noticed Harry's broom behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher, away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. From the stands, Hermione had spotted the problem. Borrowing Hagrid's binoculars, she frantically scanned the crowd until she found what she was looking for: Snape, in the middle of the stands opposite them, his eyes fixed on Harry, muttering non-stop under his breath. "It's Snape!" Hermione gasped to Ron. "He's jinxing the broom. What do we do?" Ron asked desperately. "Leave it to me," Hermione said, already pushing her way through the crowd. Harry's broom was now rolling over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. The whole crowd was on its feet, watching in horror as the Weasley twins tried to pull Harry onto one of their brooms, but it was no use. Every time they got near him, the broom jumped higher still. In the teacher's stand, Hermione crept behind Professor Quirrell, accidentally knocking him headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered, "Incendio." A jet of bluebell flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar, she scrambled back along the row. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back onto his broom. As he raced toward the ground, he clapped a hand to his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch," he shouted, waving it above his head. The game ended in complete confusion, with Slytherins protesting that Harry hadn't caught the snitch but nearly swallowed it. Regardless, Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Later, in Hagrid's hut, Harry, Ron, and Hermione debated what had happened. "It was Snape," Ron insisted. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering, not taking his eyes off you." "Rubbish," Hagrid objected. "Why would Snape do something like that?" The trio exchanged glances, then Harry decided to tell Hagrid what they discovered about Snape's injury and his attempt to get past the three-headed dog at Halloween. "How do you know about Fluffy?" Hagrid demanded, dropping his teapot. "Fluffy?" Ron echoed incredulously. "Yeah, he's mine, bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the, yes?" Harry asked eagerly. "Now, don't ask me any more," Hagrid said gruffly. "That's top secret, that is." "But Snape's trying to steal it," Hermione insisted. "Snape's a Hogwarts teacher, he'd do nothing of the sort." "Then why did he just try to kill Harry?" Hermione demanded. That evening, while Ron and Hermione continued debating Snape's intentions, Harry slipped away to visit Shadow. Lupin accompanied him, looking troubled. "I observed the match carefully, Harry," the wizard said as they walked toward the forest. "Someone was indeed jinxing your broom, but I'm not convinced it was Severus. His countercurse was actually helping counteract the jinx." "Countercurse?" Harry repeated. But Hermione saw him muttering and not breaking eye contact. "Precisely the technique for both jinxes and counterjinxes," Lupin explained. "What's more concerning is that when Severus was distracted, your broom's erratic behavior worsened, not improved." They reached Shadow's enclosure, finding the Dementor drifting restlessly near the magical boundary. It calmed noticeably as Harry approached, floating closer to the edge of the containment field. "Hello, Shadow," Harry greeted it, feeling their bond strengthen with proximity. "Did you sense anything during the match today?" Through their connection, Harry received a complex impression, magic directed at him, malevolent intent, but from a direction Shadow couldn't precisely determine. The Dementor had been too far away to intervene, causing it significant distress. It sensed the attack but couldn't help, Harry translated for Lupin. "It's frustrated about that." Lupin nodded thoughtfully. "Protective instincts are rare in Dementors, but your bond seems to have created one. Does Shadow have any impression of who might have attacked you?" Harry concentrated on the connection, but Shadow's perception had been limited by distance. However, one detail emerged: the magical signature had triggered Shadow's hunger particularly strongly, suggesting dark magic. "Dark magic," Harry relayed. Shadow was drawn to it, wanted to feed on whoever was casting it. "That narrows our suspects but doesn't eliminate anyone conclusively," Lupin sighed. "Both Severus and Quirrell have extensive knowledge of the dark arts, though for very different reasons." As they headed back to the castle after the visit, Harry found himself pondering not just who had jinxed his broom, but why Shadow had been especially drawn to Quirrell during the troll incident. The stuttering, fearful professor seemed an unlikely dark wizard, yet something about him had captured Shadow's interest intensely. The winter term progressed with mounting suspicion about both Snape and Quirrell, though Harry kept his observations about Shadow's reaction to Quirrell mostly to himself. Ron remained convinced Snape was the villain, while Hermione continued researching Nicholas Flamel, determined to discover what was being hidden in the school. Christmas approached, bringing snow and excitement to Hogwarts. When McGonagall came around collecting names of students staying for the holiday, Harry signed up immediately. The Dursleys certainly wouldn't welcome him home, and Hogwarts at Christmas promised to be magical. Ron decided to stay as well, as his parents were visiting his brother Charlie in Romania. Hermione, however, would be returning home to spend the holiday with her family. "You'll keep looking for information on Flamel while I'm gone, won't you?" she asked anxiously. "And send me an owl if you find anything." "And you could ask your parents if they know who Flamel is," Ron suggested. "It'd be safe to ask them." "Very safe, as they're both dentists," Hermione replied with a roll of her eyes. The day before students departed for the holiday, Hermione pulled Harry aside in the common room. "I've been thinking about Shadow," she said quietly. "With fewer students around, the Christmas break might be a good opportunity for more extensive research on your bond." "What do you mean?" Harry asked. "Well, Lupin mentioned that historical accounts suggest Dementors' heirs could do more than just command the creatures," Hermione explained. "Some could see through their eyes, or use them to detect lies, or even temporarily adopt Dementor abilities themselves." "I've already experienced seeing through Shadow's eyes," Harry admitted, having finally shared this aspect of his bond with his friends. "It happens sometimes in dreams." "Have you tried doing it consciously?" Hermione pressed. "Or exploring other aspects of your connection? With the castle nearly empty, it would be safer to experiment." Harry considered this suggestion. He'd been so focused on controlling Shadow that he hadn't fully explored what their bond might enable. The idea of intentionally deepening their connection was both intriguing and slightly unnerving. "I'll think about it," he promised. "But carefully, with Lupin supervising." The following day, most students departed for the holiday, leaving Hogwarts peaceful and quiet. Harry and the Weasleys had the Gryffindor common room to themselves, playing exploding snap and wizard chess by the fire. On Christmas morning, Harry was surprised to wake to a pile of packages at the foot of his bed. Ron was already awake, tearing the paper off his own presents. "Happy Christmas," Ron greeted him sleepily. "You too," Harry replied, reaching for the topmost parcel. "I've got presents." "What did you expect, turnips?" Ron laughed. Harry opened his gifts, a roughly cut wooden flute from Hagrid, a 50-pence piece from the Dursleys, a box of chocolate frogs from Hermione, and a hand-knitted emerald green sweater from Mrs. Weasley, along with homemade fudge. The final package was light and wrapped in plain brown paper. When Harry tore it open, something fluid and silvery gray slithered to the floor, where it lay gleaming. Ron gasped. "I've heard of those. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare, and really valuable." Harry picked up the shining, silvery cloth. It was strange to touch, like water woven into material. "It's an invisibility cloak," Ron said in awe. "Try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders, and Ron gave a yell. Looking down at his body, Harry saw nothing but the floor. He dashed to the mirror to confirm. His reflection showed only his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. A note had fallen from the cloak. Harry read the narrow, loopy writing, "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you." There was no signature. Harry stared at the note, emotions welling up inside him. This had been his father's cloak, something James Potter had actually owned and used. That night, unable to sleep, Harry decided to test the cloak. Slipping out of bed, he wrapped it around himself and crept from the dormitory, through the common room, and out through the portrait hole. "Who's there?" squawked the fat lady as the portrait swung open seemingly by itself, but Harry remained silent, walking quickly down the corridor. Where should he go? The answer came to him immediately. With the invisibility cloak, he could visit Shadow without supervision. The Dementor would sense his approach regardless of the cloak, and Harry was curious to explore their bond without Lupin or Hagrid watching his every move. Navigating the castle at night proved surprisingly easy with the cloak. Harry avoided Filch and Mrs. Norris, slipped past a patrolling Professor Flitwick, and eventually made his way to the entrance hall and out onto the grounds. The night was clear and cold, stars twinkling overhead as Harry trudged through the snow toward the forest edge. Shadow sensed his approach long before he reached the enclosure, drifting to the boundary in anticipation. Harry removed the cloak once he reached the warded area, smiling as Shadow reached toward him through the magical barrier, not touching, but as close as the containment field would allow. "Happy Christmas, Shadow," Harry greeted softly. "I brought you something." From his pocket, Harry withdrew a small vial Lupin had given him, concentrated emotions extracted from volunteers, primarily the Weasley twins, who had found the whole concept hilarious. The specialized magic allowed Shadow to feed without harming anyone. Harry uncorked the vial and placed it on the ground at the edge of the barrier. Shadow drifted closer, extending a skeletal hand. As the Dementor focused on the vial, the emotions contained within seemed to flow out like colorful smoke, drawn toward the creature and absorbed into its dark form. Through their bond, Harry felt Shadow's satisfaction. The emotions were pure and potent, more nourishing than those harvested from unwilling subjects or animals. When the last wisp disappeared, the Dementor drifted back slightly, seemingly content. "I want to try something," Harry said, sitting cross-legged in the snow just outside the barrier. "Hermione's been researching our connection, and she thinks I might be able to see through your eyes consciously, not just in dreams." Shadow drifted closer again, radiating interest through their bond. "I'm going to close my eyes," Harry continued, "and try to connect with your perception. Don't fight it, okay?" The Dementor gave the equivalent of a nod, a slight dip of its hooded form. Harry closed his eyes, focusing on the bond he could feel stretching between them. Instead of merely sending thoughts or emotions along it, he tried to open himself to Shadow's consciousness, to see as the Dementor saw. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his perception began to shift. The darkness behind his eyelids lightened, colors appearing, but not colors as humans perceived them. Harry saw the world through Shadow's alien senses, where living things glowed with emotional energy, magic shimmered like heat waves in the air, and the castle in the distance blazed with the combined life force of everyone inside. Harry himself appeared as a bright beacon to Shadow's senses, his magic and emotions particularly vivid and appealing, yet categorized differently from potential prey. Looking down at his own hands through Shadow's perception, Harry saw not flesh but a luminous outline surrounding a core of swirling magic. "This is amazing," Harry thought, and felt Shadow's agreement ripple through their shared consciousness. He expanded his awareness, seeing the forest through Shadow's eyes. Animals appeared as moving lights of varying intensity, their emotions simplified compared to humans but still detectable. The centaur herd was a cluster of bright points deeper in the trees, their magical nature making them shine more vibrantly than ordinary creatures. Turning his attention toward the castle, Harry was startled by what he saw. Hogwarts itself had a magical aura, ancient protective spells layered throughout its structure like a glowing skeleton. But what truly caught his attention was a dark, writhing presence in one of the upper floors, a magical signature that appeared fundamentally wrong to Shadow's senses, both attractive as potential feeding and repulsive in its corrupted nature. "What is that?" Harry directed the thought through their bond. Shadow's response came as impressions rather than words: darkness, fragmentation, possession. The Dementor had detected this presence before, particularly around the stuttering professor in the purple turban. "Quirrell?" Harry thought in shock. "What's wrong with him?" Before Shadow could convey more information, Harry's concentration wavered, and the connection snapped. He gasped, opening his eyes to find himself back in his own perception, shivering in the snow as dawn approached. "I need to tell Dumbledore," he muttered, struggling to his feet. Something seriously wrong with Quirrell. As he turned to leave, Harry felt Shadow's urgent push through their bond. The Dementor drifted to the edge of its containment, extending a skeletal hand as if reaching for him. "What is it?" Harry asked, stepping closer. A complex impression flowed between them: danger, warning, protection. Shadow was trying to tell him something important about the dark presence it had detected. "You think it's dangerous?" "More than we realized." The Dementor's response was affirmative, tinged with a hunger that concerned Harry. Whatever was wrong with Quirrell, Shadow was both drawn to it and disturbed by it, an unusual reaction for a creature that typically fed indiscriminately on human emotions. "I'll be careful," Harry promised. "And I'll come back tomorrow night. We need to understand what we're dealing with." As he headed back to the castle under his invisibility cloak, Harry's mind raced. If Quirrell was somehow possessed or corrupted, could he be the one after whatever Fluffy was guarding? Was he the one who had jinxed Harry's broom during the Quidditch match? And most disturbing of all, what kind of dark presence would interest a Dementor so intensely? Harry needed to share this information with Ron, and they needed to contact Hermione immediately. The mystery at Hogwarts had just become considerably darker. Chapter 3, Ministry of Shadows. The remainder of Harry's first year at Hogwarts passed in a blur of revelations and danger. After discovering Quirrell's dark secret through Shadow's perception, Harry had taken his concerns to Dumbledore, who listened with grave attention but offered frustratingly little direct action. The headmaster merely thanked Harry for the information and assured him the situation was being monitored closely. Unsatisfied with this response, Harry, Ron, and Hermione had continued their own investigation, eventually connecting the dots between Nicholas Flamel, the Philosopher's Stone, and Quirrell's increasingly suspicious behavior. When Harry's scar burned painfully during a Forbidden Forest detention, accompanied by Shadow's frantic attempts to break its containment in response to his distress, the trio became convinced that Voldemort himself was somehow involved. Their suspicions were confirmed in dramatic fashion when Quirrell made his move for the stone while Dumbledore was away from the castle. Harry, having followed the possessed professor past the third-floor corridor's defenses, had confronted him in the final chamber, discovering that Voldemort existed as a parasitic face on the back of Quirrell's head. In that moment of mortal danger, Harry had called Shadow with every fiber of his being, and the Dementor had responded, shattering its magical containment and racing to the castle with unprecedented speed. The confrontation that followed would become legend within Hogwarts, though few knew the full truth. Shadow had burst into the chamber just as Quirrell wrapped his hands around Harry's throat. The Dementor's effect on the possessed professor was immediate and devastating. Quirrell had screamed in two distinct voices, his body convulsing as Voldemort's spirit reacted with particular horror to the creature's presence. "Keep it away!" Voldemort had shrieked, his voice high and cold from the back of Quirrell's head. "The Soul Feeder cannot touch us." Harry had never seen Shadow move so quickly or attack so ferociously. The Dementor had descended upon Quirrell, skeletal hands extended, drawing not just emotions but seemingly pulling at the parasitic connection between host and possessor. Quirrell collapsed, and Shadow had begun what could only be described as feeding on Voldemort's spirit directly. What happened next remained slightly hazy in Harry's memory. There had been a terrible scream, an explosion of dark energy, and then unconsciousness. He'd awakened in the hospital wing 3 days later to learn that Quirrell had died, the stone was safe, and Shadow had been forcibly returned to a reinforced containment area after what Dumbledore described as becoming temporarily unresponsive to your control. The headmaster had explained that Shadow's hunger for Voldemort's fractured soul had overwhelmed its bond with Harry, the first major breach in their connection. Only Dumbledore's intervention had prevented the Dementor from running amok in the castle afterward, drunk on the dark power it had partially consumed. The incident had left Harry shaken, not just by his narrow escape from death, but by the realization that his control over Shadow wasn't as absolute as he believed. Nevertheless, as the school year concluded, an uneasy equilibrium had been restored. Shadow, seemingly satiated by whatever essence of Voldemort it had consumed, had become more docile, responding to Harry with its usual obedience. The summer now loomed ahead, bringing with it the unwelcome prospect of returning to the Dursleys. The question of Shadow had been resolved through a complex arrangement. The Dementor would remain in its containment area at Hogwarts, with Lupin checking on it regularly, while Harry would return to Privet Drive under the watchful eye of wizards Dumbledore had stationed nearby for his protection. "You'll be able to sense each other still, even at that distance," Lupin had explained during their final meeting. "But the separation will be good for both of you, Harry. It will help establish boundaries in your bond." Now, as the Hogwarts Express sped toward London, Harry gazed out the window, watching the countryside flash by. Beside him, Ron and Hermione discussed summer plans, their voices a comforting background to his thoughts. "You'll write, won't you?" Hermione asked anxiously. "Both of you." "Course we will," Ron assured her. "Harry needs something to keep him sane with those awful muggles." "I want regular updates about Shadow too," Hermione added, lowering her voice though they had the compartment to themselves. "I've been reading about magical bonds, and separation can sometimes affect them in unpredictable ways." Harry nodded absently. The impending separation from Shadow weighed on him more than he wanted to admit. The Dementor had been a constant presence in his life for nearly a year now, their connection deepening beyond what anyone had anticipated. Even now, despite the growing distance, he could feel Shadow's awareness of him, a cool touch at the edge of his consciousness. "I'll be fine," he said finally, forcing a smile. "And I've got Hedwig to carry messages." "You will be careful, though, won't you?" Hermione persisted. "After what happened with Quirrell and you know who, things might be different." Harry knew what she meant. Shadow had tasted Voldemort's soul, or whatever remained of it, and the experience had changed the Dementor in subtle ways Harry was still coming to understand. Its hunger had shifted, becoming more focused, more discriminating, and perhaps more dangerous. "I'll be careful," he promised. "Dumbledore says the wards around Privet Drive will protect me from outside threats." "And the Dursleys?" He trailed off, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. "Let's just say they'll be on their best behavior this summer." Number 4, Privet Drive looked exactly as Harry had left it, painfully ordinary, meticulously maintained, and utterly unwelcoming. Uncle Vernon waited by the car in the station parking lot, his face purple with suppressed rage as Harry approached. "Get in," he grunted, not bothering with a greeting. "And keep that ruddy bird quiet, or it'll stay in the car." Hedwig, indignant at this treatment, ruffled her feathers but remained mercifully silent as Harry loaded his trunk into the boot. The drive back to Little Whinging passed in stony silence, broken only by Vernon's occasional muttered complaints about freaks and unnatural nonsense. When they arrived, Aunt Petunia was waiting in the hallway, her lips pressed into a thin line as Harry dragged his trunk inside. Dudley was nowhere to be seen, presumably hiding in his bedroom, a habit he'd developed ever since his encounter with Shadow the previous summer. "Your room," Vernon said curtly, jabbing a finger toward the stairs. "Take your things up, then come back down. We need to establish some ground rules for the summer." "Yes, Uncle Vernon," Harry replied, keeping his tone neutral despite the surge of annoyance he felt. As he hauled his trunk upstairs to the smallest bedroom, Harry felt a familiar chill at the back of his mind, Shadow, responding to his emotions from hundreds of miles away. The sensation was fainter than usual but unmistakable. Somehow, despite the distance, their connection persisted. "I'm okay," Harry thought deliberately, sending reassurance through the bond. Just the usual Dursley welcome. The chill receded slightly, though he could still sense Shadow's attentiveness, like a predator watching from afar. It was both comforting and slightly unnerving to know the Dementor remained so aware of him despite the separation. When Harry returned downstairs, he found the Dursleys gathered in the living room, looking as though they were preparing for an unpleasant medical procedure. Vernon stood by the fireplace, arms crossed over his massive chest, while Petunia perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dudley had been coaxed from his room but huddled in an armchair as far from the doorway as possible. "Sit," Vernon commanded, pointing to a straight-backed chair positioned in the center of the room. Harry complied, fighting the urge to smile at the formal setup. The Dursleys were clearly terrified of him, despite their attempts to maintain the illusion of authority. "Now then," Vernon began, his voice gruff with forced confidence, "we've been informed by that bearded fellow that you're to stay here for the entire summer. Against our wishes, I might add." "Professor Dumbledore," Harry supplied helpfully. "Don't interrupt." Vernon snapped, though with less conviction than usual. "As I was saying, since we're stuck with you, there will be rules. First, no. You know what in the house. No waving that stick of yours, no floating things, no turning teacups into rats. Nothing abnormal. I'm not allowed to use magic outside school anyway," Harry pointed out. "It's against wizarding law." The word magic made the Dursleys flinch collectively, but Vernon pressed on. "Second, that owl stays in its cage when you're not sending messages." He nearly choked on the acknowledgement that Harry had friends who might write to him. "No strange visitors, no talk of your abnormality where the neighbors might hear, and you'll do your share of chores around the house." Seems reasonable, Harry agreed mildly, knowing full well that your share would translate to most of the work. Vernon seemed wrong-footed by Harry's easy compliance. His beady eyes narrowed suspiciously. And third, he continued, voice dropping to a menacing whisper, there will be none of that cold business from last summer. No, shadows. I won't have it, boy. Ah, so they did remember Shadow. Harry had wondered if the Dursleys had managed to convince themselves they'd imagined the Dementors' presence. Shadow isn't here, Harry said truthfully. It stayed at Hogwarts. Relief visibly washed over all three Dursleys, though Dudley still looked skeptical. But, Harry added, unable to resist the opportunity, it can sense when I'm in danger. Even from this distance. And it can travel very quickly when it needs to. The color drained from Vernon's face. Are you threatening us, boy? Not at all, Harry replied innocently. Just sharing information. I thought you'd want to know, since you're so concerned about abnormal things. Vernon opened and closed his mouth several times, resembling a particularly large and confused fish. Finally, he managed to sputter, well, see that you remember your place here. No special treatment just because of that school of yours. Of course, Uncle Vernon, Harry agreed, rising from his chair. If that's all, I'd like to unpack. As he headed back upstairs, Harry fought to suppress a smile. For the first time, he had the upper hand in the Dursley household, not through direct threats or actions, but through fear of what might happen if they pushed him too far. It wasn't a particularly noble advantage, but after years of mistreatment, Harry couldn't bring himself to feel guilty about it. In his bedroom, he released Hedwig from her cage, allowing her to stretch her wings before settling on top of the wardrobe. It's going to be a different kind of summer, he told her softly, stroking her feathers. Not comfortable, maybe, but better than before. As he unpacked his meager possessions, Harry felt Shadow's presence at the edge of his awareness, watchful, patient, and surprisingly comforting despite the distance between them. For the first few weeks of summer, an uneasy truce prevailed at number 4, Privet Drive. The Dursleys assigned Harry chores, but nothing unreasonable, and mealtimes no longer featured dramatic differences in portion sizes. Dudley still avoided Harry whenever possible, scurrying from rooms when his cousin entered and sleeping with his bedroom light on. Harry maintained regular correspondence with Ron and Hermione, as well as occasional letters to Lupin about Shadow. The news from Hogwarts was reassuring, the Dementor remained calm in its containment area, though Lupin noted it grew restless during nighttime hours, when Harry's connection to it typically strengthened. Shadow misses you, Lupin wrote in early July. Dumbledore believes your bond has evolved beyond what was previously documented in historical cases. The distance separation was meant to test its limits, but it seems your connection transcends physical proximity entirely. Harry wasn't surprised. Each night, as he drifted between wakefulness and sleep, he could feel Shadow more clearly, sometimes catching glimpses of the Hogwarts grounds through the Dementor's perception. These moments of shared consciousness had become so natural that Harry hardly noticed them anymore, the cool touch of Shadow's awareness merging with his own, two minds briefly overlapping across the hundreds of miles between them. His 12th birthday approached with little fanfare from the Dursleys, though Harry knew his friends wouldn't forget. The night before, he stayed up late, watching the minutes tick closer to midnight on the battered alarm clock Dudley had discarded years ago. As the hands aligned at 12, Harry whispered, "Happy birthday to me." A soft tapping at the window interrupted his solitary celebration. Harry opened it to admit not just Hedwig returning from a hunt, but a small, exhausted screech owl bearing a package from Hermione, and the Weasleys' ancient grey owl, Errol, who looked ready to collapse under the weight of what appeared to be several parcels bound together. Harry quickly relieved the birds of their burdens, offering water and owl treats before turning eagerly to his presents. From Hermione, a luxury eagle feather quill and a card promising a book on advanced defensive magic to follow by separate post. From the Weasleys, a large birthday cake, hand-knitted socks, and letters from both Ron and the twins. A fourth owl arrived just as Harry was sampling Mrs. Weasley's cake, a handsome tawny carrying a small package wrapped in silver paper. The accompanying note was written in Lupin's neat handwriting: "Harry, happy 12th birthday. The enclosed gift comes with Dumbledore's approval, though we ask that you use it responsibly. It contains a sample of Shadow's essence, not the creature itself, but a magical impression that should strengthen your connection temporarily if needed. In an emergency, breaking the seal will create a momentary direct link, allowing Shadow to perceive your surroundings as if it were present. Consider it a precaution only, not for casual use. Your bond is already unusually strong at a distance, this is merely a safeguard. Enjoy your day, and know that your parents would be immensely proud of the young man you're becoming. Warmly, Remus Lupin." Harry unwrapped the package with care, revealing a small crystal vial filled with what looked like swirling black mist. Holding it up to the moonlight streaming through his window, he watched the darkness inside pulse gently, almost like a heartbeat. Through his bond with Shadow, he felt the Dementor's immediate recognition of its own essence, a flicker of interest passing between them. "Thank you," Harry whispered, knowing Lupin couldn't hear but feeling grateful nonetheless. He tucked the vial carefully into his sock drawer, beneath a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks where no one would think to look. The birthday celebration continued in whispered excitement as Harry opened Ron's letter, which contained not only birthday wishes but an invitation: "Dad's coming to get you on Saturday at noon, whether the Muggles like it or not. Too much to explain by letter, but we've got loads to tell you. Hope the Muggles are treating you okay. See you soon." Ron. Saturday was just 3 days away. Harry grinned, anticipation bubbling up inside him. A summer at the Burrow, Ron's home, sounded infinitely better than remaining at Privet Drive, even with the Dursleys on their best behavior. As he prepared for bed, gathering owl feathers and wrapping paper, Harry felt a sudden chill that had nothing to do with Shadow. Looking up, he found himself staring into a pair of enormous green eyes that were peering at him through the darkness, eyes that belonged to neither owl nor human, but to a small creature perched on his bed. Harry nearly shouted in surprise but managed to stifle the sound. The creature was about 3 feet tall, with bat-like ears, a pencil-thin nose, and wearing what appeared to be a filthy pillowcase. It bowed so low that its long, thin nose touched the carpet. "Harry Potter," it squeaked in a high-pitched voice. "So long has Dobby wanted to meet you, sir. Such an honor it is." Thank you," Harry replied, bewildered. "Who are you?" "Dobby, sir. Just Dobby. Dobby the house elf." Harry had never encountered a house elf before, though he'd heard Ron mention them. Not to be rude or anything, but this isn't a great time for a house elf to be in my bedroom." The elf hung his head. "Dobby understands, sir. Dobby has come to tell Harry Potter, it is difficult, sir. Dobby wonders where to begin." As the strange conversation unfolded, Dobby revealed he had been stopping Harry's letters from his friends all summer, a discovery that explained why Harry had received so few owls until tonight. More disturbingly, the elf insisted Harry must not return to Hogwarts, claiming terrible danger awaited there. "What danger?" Harry demanded. "Who's plotting it?" But Dobby wouldn't, or couldn't, elaborate, only growing more agitated as Harry refused to promise he wouldn't return to school. The elf's distress was palpable, and Harry felt Shadow stirring in response, the Dementor sensing his confusion and concern across the miles. When Dobby threatened to make noise that would wake the Dursleys unless Harry promised not to return to Hogwarts, Harry felt his patience snap. "Dobby, listen to me," he said firmly, feeling a coldness settle in his voice that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "I'm going back to Hogwarts. My friends are there. My protector is there." The house elf's ears drooped further. "Protector, sir. Dobby has heard whispers that Harry Potter has tamed a dark creature. That it guards him, obeys him." Harry stiffened. How had news of Shadow spread beyond Hogwarts? "What have you heard exactly?" Dobby wrung his hands nervously. "Dark wizards speak of it in corners, sir. They say Harry Potter commands a Dementor, that it fought for him against a servant of he who must not be named. They are concerned, sir. Good, Harry said coldly. They should be concerned. And you should know that even if I promised not to return to Hogwarts, Shadow would come for me. It would find me, Dobby. And it would not be pleased with anyone who kept me from it. The effect of these words on Dobby was dramatic. The house elf's eyes widened in terror, and he backed away several steps. Harry Potter speaks the truth, he whispered. Dobby can feel it, the cold touch of the Soul Eater, even now, watching through Harry Potter's eyes. Harry hadn't intended to channel Shadow's presence, but he realized the Dementor had indeed drawn closer to his consciousness, responding to his emotional state. The room had chilled noticeably, frost forming on the window despite the summer warmth outside. I don't want to threaten you, Dobby, Harry said more gently, reining in Shadow's influence. But I need to understand what danger you're warning me about. Dobby hesitated, then with a sudden wail of Dobby must punish himself most grievously for coming, the elf vanished with a crack like a whip. The abrupt departure left Harry standing alone in his bedroom, thoroughly confused and increasingly concerned. Whatever plot Dobby had tried to warn him about, it was serious enough to terrify a house elf into risking punishment to prevent Harry's return to Hogwarts. Through his bond with Shadow, Harry could feel the Dementor's alertness, its protective instinct roused by the strange encounter. In the crystal vial hidden in his drawer, the black mist swirled more actively, responding to the connection between them. We'll be ready, Harry murmured, not sure if he was speaking to himself or to Shadow. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together. Saturday arrived with an atmosphere of tense anticipation at number 4, Privet Drive. Harry had informed the Dursleys that the Weasleys would be collecting him at noon, a piece of news that sent Uncle Vernon into a state of nervous agitation. He'd vacillated between forbidding the visit entirely and being glad to be rid of Harry for the remainder of the summer, finally settling on a wary acceptance coupled with incessant pacing. These people, Vernon demanded for the third time as the clock approached noon, how exactly are they arriving? I don't know, Harry answered truthfully. Ron just said his dad would collect me. Well, they'd better not do any of that funny business, Vernon muttered. No appearing out of thin air, no flying motorcycles, none of it. Harry privately doubted Mr. Weasley would arrive by conventional means, but he kept this thought to himself, simply nodding agreeably. At precisely 12 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Vernon nearly jumped out of his skin, while Petunia smoothed her dress nervously and Dudley scrambled upstairs to hide in his room. Harry reached the door first, opening it to find a tall, thin man with balding red hair and glasses, dressed in what was clearly an attempt at Muggle clothing, though the combination of a tweed jacket over a Hawaiian shirt and jeans suggested limited success. You must be Harry, the man exclaimed cheerfully. I'm Arthur Weasley, Ron's father. Delighted to meet you at last. Hello, Mr. Weasley, Harry grinned, already liking Ron's dad. Please come in. My aunt and uncle are just here. Arthur stepped into the hallway, gazing around with undisguised fascination at the ordinary Muggle furnishings. His eyes lit up particularly at the sight of the electric lamp on the hall table, which he seemed tempted to examine more closely before catching sight of the Dursleys. Ah! You must be Harry's family, he said brightly, extending a hand toward Vernon. Wonderful to meet you. I've always been fascinated by Muggle living arrangements. That thing on your wall, is that an electricity meter? Remarkable. Vernon shook the offered hand with extreme reluctance, looking as though he expected it to explode. Yes, well. You're here for the boy, then. Indeed. If Harry's ready, we'll be off. I've brought the car, ministry vehicle, you know. Thought it might be easier for everyone. This news visibly relieved the Dursleys. Harry, who had expected something more magical, felt a twinge of disappointment but quickly recovered when he saw the mischievous glint in Mr. Weasley's eye. I'll get my trunk, Harry said, heading upstairs. When he returned, dragging his school trunk and carrying Hedwig's cage, he found Mr. Weasley engaged in an enthusiastic one-sided conversation about electrical plugs while Vernon looked increasingly horrified. Petunia had retreated to the kitchen, peering occasionally through the door with an expression of mingled curiosity and distaste. "All set, Harry?" Mr. Weasley asked cheerfully. "Excellent. Well, thank you for your hospitality," he added to the Dursleys. "Harry will be quite safe with us for the remainder of the summer, and will ensure he catches the Hogwarts Express on September 1st. Vernon grunted something that might have been acknowledgement, while Harry bid a perfunctory goodbye to his relatives. Neither side pretended any real regret at the parting. Outside, Harry was surprised to see a perfectly ordinary-looking dark green sedan parked in the driveway. Mr. Weasley led him to it with obvious pride. "Ministry car," he explained, opening the trunk, which expanded impossibly to accommodate Harry's belongings. "Enchanted, of course, though it looks perfectly muggle from the outside. Thought it best not to attract attention in this neighborhood." Harry climbed into the back seat, finding it far more spacious than the exterior suggested, with comfortable leather upholstery that seemed to adjust perfectly to his body. Mr. Weasley took the driver's seat, tapping the dashboard with his wand before turning the key. "Just a little help with the navigation," he explained with a wink as the car pulled smoothly away from Privet Drive. "Now, Harry, I imagine you're wondering about Ron's letter. Bit mysterious, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir," Harry admitted. "Has something happened?" Mr. Weasley's expression grew more serious. "Several things, actually. For one, the Ministry has been in something of an uproar lately. Word has spread about your unusual companion." Harry tensed. "Shadow?" "But Dumbledore said that would be kept quiet." "Dumbledore tried," Mr. Weasley nodded, "but after what happened with Quirrell at the end of term, well, too many people noticed the extreme cold, the frost patterns. Questions were asked, and eventually, the Ministry demanded answers." "Am I in trouble?" Harry asked, anxiety building. No, not trouble exactly," Mr. Weasley assured him, though his tone wasn't entirely convincing. "More a matter of intense interest. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures is particularly keen to understand how a 12-year-old wizard can command a Dementor, something that normally requires teams of trained specialists." The car turned onto a country lane, buildings growing sparser as they left the suburbs behind. Harry noticed they were traveling considerably faster than normal traffic would allow, though the ride remained perfectly smooth. "There's more, isn't there?" Harry prompted, sensing Mr. Weasley's hesitation. "Yes, I'm afraid so," the man sighed. "Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father, has been making quite a stir in the Ministry. Claims your control of a Dementor represents a danger to other students. He's even suggested you might be—" Mr. Weasley trailed off uncomfortably. "Might be what?" "Well, that you might be showing signs of dark magical affinity. Similar to you-know-who." The comparison stung more than Harry expected. "That's ridiculous. I don't want to hurt anyone. Shadow only protects me." "I know that, Harry," Mr. Weasley said gently. "And Dumbledore has been your staunchest defender. But politics at the Ministry are complicated. Fudge, the Minister, is under pressure from various factions. Some see your ability as a potential asset, others as a threat." "An asset?" Harry repeated, confused. "Dementors guard Azkaban prison," Mr. Weasley explained. "The Ministry has always had an uneasy relationship with them, necessary allies but never fully trusted. Someone who could communicate with Dementors, perhaps even influence them more broadly." He shook his head. "Well, certain departments find that prospect very interesting indeed." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with Shadow. The idea that the Ministry might want to use his abilities, to exploit his connection with the Dementors, had never occurred to him. "What does Dumbledore say about all this?" he asked. "He maintains that your connection with this particular Dementor is a unique magical phenomenon that should be studied carefully, not exploited hastily," Mr. Weasley replied. He's managed to keep ministry officials away from Hogwarts so far, but there's been talk of a formal inquiry when term begins. The car turned onto an even narrower lane, tall hedgerows on either side creating a tunnel of greenery. Harry processed this troubling information, wondering what it would mean for him and Shadow when they returned to school. "There's one other thing, Mr. Weasley said, his tone lighter. Something a bit more cheerful. We've had a letter from Hogwarts about a week ago. All the children's book lists and, well, I'll let the family tell you the rest." Harry recognized the deliberate change of subject but didn't press further. The car crested a hill, and suddenly the burrow came into view, a house so impossible it could only exist through magic. It looked as though it had once been a small stone cottage, but extra rooms had been added over the years until it was several stories high, with sections jutting out at odd angles, the whole structure seeming to defy gravity. "It's brilliant," Harry breathed, his worries temporarily forgotten as he took in the ramshackle wonder of "Please open the next chapter now." The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.